the most epic event in NBAA history, the 2021 NBAA Business Aviation Convention and Exhibition. NBAA Base is happening from October 12th through 14th. Join us at the new West Hall at the Las Vegas Convention Center for the first in-person industry event in nearly 2 years. NBAA Base, it's on. Visit nbaa.org/2021 for details and make plans now to attend.
You need a reliable partner
to deliver all your aviation needs.
A partner who can get whatever you need
and wherever you need it.
And negotiate with vendors on your behalf.
To get the best prices possible.
A partner that delivers in optimal time.
And cost efficiency.
And ensures you enjoy seamless operation
with 24/7 support.
You need UAS.
You need UAS.
You need UAS.
You need UAS.
Contact us for quote.
I think what makes us unique is our first-class customer service. We offer unparalleled, seamless, client-focused service. You may have seen our tagline in various advertisements, putting you at the center of everything we do. That is not just a slogan. That is at the core of our business philosophy.
Built to go the distance. Built to fly.
It's all about being connected. That's why SES and its partners are working together to ensure end users all have the connectivity that they need, whether they be chief executives, high-profile personalities, government officials, as well as pilots and crews. Closing the gap between life on the ground and life above the clouds.
Our mission is to connect the world with fast, reliable internet service wherever you go. We've been providing connectivity solutions for over 30 years. And the same great connectivity you expect at the office is also available at 40,000 feet. What's the secret? Capacity. Capacity matters. It's the backbone of a high-speed network. Think of it like the number of lanes on a highway. Viasat's network is like a smart superhighway with many lanes that automatically adds more when and where traffic demands. Powerful network capacity gives you higher speeds and a better in-flight internet experience. That's why capacity matters. Only Viasat offers the roadmap to the world's highest capacity, unparalleled in-flight internet experience. Demand for data is growing rapidly. Viasat will be there to meet that demand. And the equipment you install today is already forward compatible to take advantage of higher capacity and speeds. Because life and business don't stop at 40,000 feet. Viasat.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to CGAI Global 2021. It's been a whistle-stop tour around the world, and we've still got some fantastic sessions to come. So if you've already been with us for 10 hours, you might as well stay for the next 4. And if you've just joined us, where have you been? We're delighted to have three of the leading associations who have been fighting for you all during COVID. And we're going to be looking at the session recording what's happening on the Hill / in Brussels. Delighted to have Ed Bolen from NBAA, Tim Obitts from NATA, and Athar Husain Khan from EBAA. Guys, how are you?
Cool. Very good. Thanks, Al.
Great. Well, thanks. Ed, I just saw an ad for NBAA. It looks amazing.
We are looking forward to welcoming everybody to Las Vegas in person. We just had a board meeting yesterday that was in person, and it was just magnificent to feel that human connection again, Al.
And I do love the fact that you've got a bigger hall, because the last two were way too small.
Well, it's not just a big hall, it's a beautiful hall, brand new, state-of-the-art, and I think we're going to add a luster to it that hasn't been seen before.
I was always pretty impressed at the other two, to be honest. So,
yeah, well, even better.
Athar, let's start with you. What's the general mood towards business aviation at the moment in Brussels?
Well, I think, coming out of the pandemic, I'm actually quite proud of the industry. I think the industry has showcased how resilient it is, its resolve in dealing with the pandemic. And I think more and more there is recognition in Brussels society, as well as at the, let's say, regulatory European level for what business aviation brings to society. Its connectivity and its economic output, whether it's in jobs, whether it's in economic output as such. And I think more and more people have realized how important business aviation is also for humanitarian. There's a lot of humanitarian operations that have gone around, not just in Europe, but all over the world. And I think there's more and more recognition about that and for that. And I think business aviation, I'm pretty proud to represent an industry here in Brussels, which has showcased its added value to society. And I think more and more we are seeing recognition of that. Not that there are no challenges ahead, there are, and I'm sure we'll discuss them today as well. But all in all, I'm actually quite proud of the way that the industry has showcased itself in the last 18 months.
Do you look enviously across the Atlantic at the relationships that Tim and Ed have in the US is much more pro business aviation, isn't it? Genuinely.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, and that's obviously it's a challenge for us on this side of the Atlantic. There's the institutional bit that we have to deal with 27 different member states, and agencies representing more than 40 or 50 countries. So that's a challenge in itself. But I would agree that on the US side and the Canadian side, there is more general appreciation for what business aviation, corporate aviation brings to society, economy, jobs, investment, etc. So there's a challenge for us. We're aware of that, and we're working very hard with our colleagues like Tim and Ed as well to showcase that and make sure that we represent those interests.
Tim, I haven't been following US politics. I don't know if anything's happened in the last year.
Yeah, right.
What's the mood like at the moment towards the industry?
The mood has been actually pretty good. Ed and I and others like Pete Bunce, and Jim Viola over at HEI, we've all been working together and having the message about what general aviation is doing, not only for the economy, but for COVID relief. And, the proof's in the pudding. Local communities love it. The commercial airlines shrunk their service during COVID, and business aviation stepped up to the plate and continue to be the gateway and the way to access rural communities. So in the U.S., commercial aviation services about 55% of the population. And Ed and I did a great job, I think, up on Capitol Hill, sending the message that we need to care also about the other 45% of the U.S. population. And the way we service them is through business aviation. So our message was well heard, and we got funding collectively for our members, and we helped in a big way.
Do you think it helped that you'd had other battles, like the FAA privatization, other big things that you guys have been fighting at, had you ready? You weren't ready for you hadn't planned for a pandemic, but the fact you sort of had the engine geared and ready, do you think that helped? Ed?
Yeah, I think the grassroots support in our community has really enabled us to do a lot. Through the years, we've built strong relationships with members of Congress, strong relationships with local communities, and we've really kind of developed a activist mobilization type of muscle that we find can adapt and evolve to the challenges that are presenting it. So during COVID, as has been mentioned, our members were flying tests, they were flying vaccines, they were helping companies continue to move their people around safely and efficiently, and that was recognized and appreciated by the press, by members of Congress, and by city leaders that recognized that business aviation was really a lifeline for their community. So in a lot of ways, the work that we have done through the years on recognizing the value of business aviation, the jobs, the economic development, and the humanitarian flights, all of that really came to the forefront over the last 16, 18 months.
And I think there's a lot of recognition from your members, all three of you, and also Gamma and HAI, and that you guys have done and AOPA have done a fantastic job for representing the industry during this downturn in your different ways. Ed, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 15 months?
Well, that relationships matter. We were able to call upon members of Congress, people in the executive branch, people in our industry, and bring genuine concerns to the forefront. So whether it was, as Tim mentioned, the CARES Act and the funding that we needed to keep pilots and technicians employed, or just working with the FAA on things like extending the medical examination periods and the proficiency training. Over and over again, it was about connecting, sharing challenges, and finding solutions to it. And that's the result of years of communication and relationship building. And to Tim's point, it extends through the various associations that represent the general aviation industry here.
Athar, apart from learning that Brexit wasn't your biggest headache, what have you learned?
Well, picking up on Ed's remarks, Al, I think what we certainly learned, and I think what we were able to capitalize on, is that we could credibly showcase the added value of the industry to society. And I just mentioned humanitarian. I mean, no other transport mode in Europe came even close to what business aviation did at the humanitarian level throughout the crisis. Whether it was passengers, people who were ill, medical supplies, masks, vaccinations, whatever it was, business aviation was at the forefront of maintaining that service to society, that connectivity to society. And I think that's certainly been very helpful in us getting even more inroads and be more effective in showcasing what we can do and what we need as an industry as well from society at, let's say, at the Brussels regulatory level. So I think, as what I just said in my opening remarks, the pride is very much in the fact that we've been really able to take that leap forward and really are a recognized entity now in this discussion.
Tim, same question to you. What's your biggest learning?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think the best thing that happened out of all of this, and I repeat this a lot, is teamwork. Associations, we all work together, Athar, Ed, and me, along with our brethren, and teamwork with the agencies and Capitol Hill. Like Ed said, we've got these great relationships. Our regulatory teams all work together and came up with creative solutions. And thank God the agencies were willing to listen to us. So it was teamwork. So together we're better, and collectively we accomplished great things during this time.
Tim, let's try and do what's always impossible at the moment and put COVID aside. And I know we haven't solved all the COVID issues, and there's a lot to come. What else is on your horizon? What's your big what are you spending a lot of time thinking about, coming up next?
Well, it's the word of the year, sustainability. And, Athar, Ed, and I work on sustainability a lot. Obviously, there are the regulatory side of the house, like combating illegal charter and other aspects. But what we're dealing with collectively with this administration is making sure that we're proactive on the message of sustainability and business aviation, continuing the education process, and working forward, and then reaching across the aisle to commercial aviation to create a standard on book and claim and transparency and accounting for sustainable aviation fuel. So that is a large part of what I'm doing and what we're all doing together.
One of the key components is you guys are fighting for tax incentives.
Absolutely. Yep. And so we've got a bill in the House with bipartisan support. We continue to work collectively on getting more bipartisan support for that. And then Senator Brown in the Senate is supposed to be introducing a bill, and we're working hard to get bipartisan support for a tax incentive. This is different than a mandate like in Europe. We've proven through the I Want My SAF campaign that we've created the demand. So you don't have to mandate change of behavior. We've changed the behavior. We need an incentive to actually have SAF molecules because we want it. And that's what we're working on.
Yeah, you can get it in California with those tax incentives.
That's right, the low carbon fuel standard. Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys have got the carrot approach. Athar, do you feel like European aviation realizes it's got a stick coming?
I think we do. Yeah, I think we do. Obviously, the story on this side of the Atlantic is slightly different, but we are actually quite enthused and encouraged by some of the legislative proposals coming out of Brussels, most notably what we call the Refuel Aviation EU initiative. And at least that's going to open up some funding for research and development, particularly on sustainable aviation fuel. And that's hopefully that's the whole idea behind it, is that's going to create even more demand in the market. And what we are particularly concerned about, and Tim referred to that with the book and claim, is the geographical spread and the uptake possibilities of that sustainable fuel. So there are things happening which are encouraging on this side of the Atlantic as well. Unfortunately, the tax regime here is slightly different compared to the US, and we're actually fighting against taxes being levied on the industry for the sake of taxing the industry. If those taxes and proceeds would be reinvested in sustainability or in research and development to facilitate, whether it's SAF or more efficient infrastructure, whatever it is, to facilitate sustainability, that would be fine with us. But what we would not appreciate, and what we're fighting against, is taxes for the sake of being taxes, just evaporate into the treasury, never to be seen again. And if you do impose a tax, calling it an environmental tax or a sustainability tax on the industry, then you should reinvest those proceeds into the industry itself. So the tax regime obviously is slightly different, but we are encouraged, as I said, with a couple of legislative proposals on this side that hopefully will facilitate particularly SAF.
Do you just explain book and claim to people who aren't familiar with it?
Tim?
Oh, me. Oh, sure. Happy to do so. So book and claim is where you want to fly on sustainable aviation fuel, but it's not at your airport, but it's available at another airport. So you cause a purchase of the sustainable aviation fuel, and in essence, you're having someone else fly in it, but you're claiming the environmental attribute of that. And that's how book and claim works in a nutshell.
And it's particularly important in Europe, where it looks likely that a lot of the SAF will be at the large commercial airports and less available for business jet. Ed.
Yeah, I think, Al, another thing just to add on to Tim's remarks is what we are pushing very hard for in Europe is that SAF will be recognized as an offset mechanism under the European emissions trading system as one of the options, and hopefully also, if there is going to be a worldwide system at some point under the ICAO CORSIA mandates, that will be recognized as well. So it's not just the book and claim and the uptake in the market, it's also the fact that the industry is recognized as such and can use the credits under the emissions trading system as well.
Ed, what else are you thinking about at the moment, apart from coronavirus?
Well, let me go back and underscore the sustainability issue. As Tim said, this is something we spent years kind of raising awareness about the remarkable benefits of SAF, helping people understand that it was safe, that it was sustainable, and we've built that demand. The Blender's Tax Credit is an effort now to increase production. And we think we're really on to something really good here in the United States with the Blender's Tax Credit. The legislation has been introduced and you're seeing broad-based support for it, not just from the business aviation community, but from all of the aviation community. So I think sustainability is significant, and I think it is a key part of our ability to go forward. And that's why we're going to have another sustainability summit, Global Business Aviation Sustainability Summit, this year at NBAA base. I think that will be a key part of galvanizing our industry to be really proactive on moving forward on this key part of sustainability, as well as a lot of other things, including advanced air mobility and other innovations. And that's really where I want to segue is sustainability is a big, important issue. Innovation, the emerging technologies, and our ability to foster the safe certification and operations of new technologies is a big deal and will have a fundamental impact on our future. And then, of course, the third issue is workforce. As we went into the pandemic, there was a sense that we needed pilots, we needed maintenance technicians, we needed to reach out to get the message out that our industry was committed to being diverse and inclusive. That is back in a very big way as flight operations are going back up. Pilot demand is there, technician demand is there, and the way we're going to solve that is by being open and inclusive and being able to recruit people to our industry, develop people in our industry, and retain people in our industry. So big challenges, but really an exciting time for business aviation in the United States and all around the world.
What's fascinating about the jobs that all three of you do is that half of what you do, and I don't know if the percentage is right, is proactive. So you guys are doing a lot of stuff on sustainability because you see it, as the right thing to do. And I think many of the people on the call agree with you, if not everyone. I know there's still some diehards in the industry who probably don't, but most people I think get the message. But so you're being very proactive on it, but it's also an area where you have to be very reactive, don't you? Where you can get attacked. And Athar, we had a report in Europe a few weeks ago attacking business aviation from Transport and the Environment, which you guys had to react to. And Ed and Tim, you've had senators proposing taxing private jets in individual states. How do you balance it? And you guys are very good at reacting, but what are the key points you're making, Athar?
It's always a balancing act, Al. We want to be proactive because we have a story to tell. We want to drive. We want to be ahead of the curve. That's not just us. That's Tim's organization, Ed's organization, others as well. There's absolutely no light between us on that. And SAF is a very good example. But in addition to that, sometimes we have to be reactive. And when reports like the Transport and Environment report comes out, we will have to react. We'll have to react to the data. We have to react to the suggestions. And we did, and I think we did pretty successfully, to be very honest. We got inroads in very, very major headlines like The Guardian and others in the UK, but all over Europe. it's part of the deal. We can be very proactive, but there will always be situations in which we have to react. And I mean, it's part of the job. I don't really mind, because as long as we can explain what we're doing, as long as we can commit to what we explain, as long as we are consistent in our messaging, as long as we are credible in our messaging, and we can showcase what we're doing, at some point in time, the coin will turn. I'm convinced about that. So I'm not bothered in the least. I never feel myself being pushed onto the back foot, or, as you say in the US, I think not being able to deal a curveball which is hurled at you. I'm actually quite happy in doing that. Just being very transparent, explaining what we can do, also explaining what we can't do, but constantly showcasing the commitment and the responsibility of the industry. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't really bother me, to be very frank.
Ed, do you enjoy it sometimes? Oh no, sorry, you're on mute. Sorry, Ed, go. Do you enjoy it?
It's always a lot more fun to be pushing a positive news story than it is responding to a negative one. But the good news for us is we have the facts on our side. Business aviation is a great industry that, as we've said, creates jobs, economic development, does humanitarian flights, and is now demonstrating clearly our commitment to sustainability. So the truth will set you free, and that's kind of what we're working on, making sure people understand the truth about business aviation, not some caricatures that are promoted by people who don't understand us and recognize the benefits we're bringing to society.
Tim, what about you? Do you just find it? Yeah, it's an easy attack. It's an easy industry to characterize, business aviation, wrongly, as Ed said. But do you find it hard work going up against the same lazy stereotypes?
Sure. Yeah, but if you're proactive, you can be part of the solution. I think that's what we've done. And my favorite thing is you talk to somebody who thinks that we're a bunch of polluters, we shouldn't be flying, and you ask them how much CO2 emission do you think we do, and you can bet them a beer for fun. Let's say, and they'll say, is it more than 20% or less than 20%? And they'll say more than 20%. No. Is it more than 10% or less than 10%? No. How about 5%? No. You get down to 0.04%, and they go, what? And then you compare that to the economic engine and what we do for the economy. They're like, you win them over at that point. You win them over. And it's a great story that we're able to tell. And we've had this opportunity to reshape the story. It's not a bunch of rich people flying around. It's people doing humanitarian missions, servicing the community, keeping the economy going. And it's a great story to tell. And that's why we've been effective in getting relief for our segment of the industry, because of that story of being proactive, thus us being part of the solution.
Okay, we've got some specific questions. Ed or Tim, do either of you have a view on bonus depreciation? Does anyone see it going soon? Ed?
My hope and my belief is that we'll be able to continue with bonus depreciation, or what we have effectively expensing. Clearly, that stimulates sales, and sales stimulate jobs. Good manufacturing jobs, brokerage jobs, finance jobs, insurance jobs, legal jobs. And so I think this is one of those things where the numbers will be clear and unequivocal that this is a good thing for our economy.
And Tim, we've seen states, or not states, we've seen municipalities sort of trying to get rid of airports. Do you see that as a trend that's continuing?
Yeah. So that's in my notes here, noise complaints. And we've seen that where some people, a member in the House is trying to revitalize and rewrite INCA. And so that is a huge issue. And that's why sustainability and our efforts there is being proactive is a huge effort, because that's a great way to combat people, not only the noise, but the pollution side. And so we got to keep it on, but we're seeing that unfortunately throughout the country more and more. And we worked collectively together to try to work with that community, have the message going. And sometimes you can reason, and sometimes people are just hell-bent to shut the thing down, which is unfortunate.
Athar, single European sky air traffic control.
Yeah, that's actually one of the worst sagas of the European institutional system. I remember long before I came to Brussels, I was one of the directors at the Government Affairs Department of KLM. That was in the 90s. That was when the single European sky was originated. So more than 20 years ago, this is. We're now 20 years on, more than 2 decades, and we've hardly made any progress. The worst thing is that obviously that's inefficient. So it costs the industry more money because of the flight levels, the routes, etc. But the worst is that in the whole sustainability and carbon footprint discussion, if we had the single European sky tomorrow, by tomorrow, we would save about 10% of carbon emissions immediately. Had we done this 20 years ago, we'd been saving 10% of carbon emissions for the last 2 decades. But we're constantly running into red tape, administrative burden, political ghosting, which is why it's a nightmare. And the interesting thing is, here in Brussels, the industry is completely aligned, has been for decades. The European Parliament is on our side, has been for decades. The European Commission is, but it's actually the member states who are blocking this. And very recently, we went through another stint of regulatory developments, discussions, and we're almost back to square one again. So yeah, that's one of the nightmare scenarios, not just with respect to the cost factor and the efficiency for operating in European airspace, but particularly also because of the completely unnecessary pollution part of it. Yeah.
Which is not something that, Ed, you don't have to worry about anything like this, do you, with FAA reauthorization?
Well, obviously, ATC is an important part of our ability to have access to airports and airspace. Tim talked a little bit earlier about how important it is to keep our airports open. I think that's one of the reasons, our business aviation is so strong in the United States, is we've got 5,000 airports in the United States that are available for our use. And generally, they're very much appreciated, understood, promoted, but in certain cases, they are not. And when they're not, losing key airports like Santa Monica or potentially East Hampton has major ramifications. So it's constantly a fight to make sure we've got a strong airport system and a strong ATC system, because as Athar was mentioning, if we don't get the ATC right, it's going to be very difficult for us to reduce our emissions significantly. Being able to fly point to point at optimum altitudes, being able to keep congestion down, those are some of the key points that need to be constantly in front of us, particularly as we promote goals like environmental stewardship. That's got to be part of the answer. It's not just making the planes more efficient, but making the overall system more efficient.
Okay, Tim, we've got an anonymous question. To clarify, this is the question. To clarify my understanding, is the situation currently that in Europe right now there are penalties being implemented for not implementing SAF? Actually, I'll come to Athar for that one. Yeah. Where the US is not implementing punishments, but instead is using a purely reward system through tax incentives. Is that fair for the US side, Tim?
We're doing tax incentives for production because Ed and I and others have shown that there is a demand, but there's no supply.
And it costs billions to set up a SAF plant, or hundreds of millions.
Yeah, $1.3 billion was the cost of the last 2 plants. Each. Yeah.
I'd do it for less. And can't be that hard. It's just a bit of piping. Athar, and in the EU, do you want to just explain? I think this is really my fault for simplifying it too much. Do you want to explain refuel briefly?
Yeah, the refuel initiative kind of focuses on is one of the building blocks of the European Green Deal. And the European Green Deal obviously is all about decarbonizing society, decarbonizing Europe, and as part of that, decarbonizing the transport sector and the transport system. The thing about why we are so encouraged by the refuel initiative is because it indicates and it showcases very much that there are going to be funds available for research and development of sustainability in the transport system. Not everything is solved. I mean, we need to ensure that business aviation is going to be in that equation, and that when those proceeds are indeed released, business aviation will be able to enjoy its fair share of those. There are technical aspects with respect to the multiplier of fuel, the multiplier effect of fuel. But obviously, if those proceeds are there and we can indeed invest in sustainable aviation fuel primarily, because that's certainly what the European Commission has projected, then we expect that the market will expand, that there will be more availability, the prices will go down, geographical spread will increase, and everyone will be home free. So that's why we're encouraged by it. And it's the first time that we see at European regulatory level actually an initiative to facilitate that with the funding. So I'm indeed to a certain extent envious of Tim and Ed, who represent the market in the US, where the tax incentives are a key part of this whole policy. We do not enjoy that in Europe, but at least we will see through a kind of U curve construction the investment in the industry, at least in the research and development.
Okay, we've got a great question from Himanshi. Thank you, Tim, Athar, and Ed. Sustainable aviation is a requirement. However, transparency is the need of the hour. Ed, would you agree with that?
Well, I think that's right. As I said before, facts are important, and I think the facts are our friend. Tim laid out that we're less than 0.5% of the emissions, but our commitment to reducing that is clear and unequivocal. A lot of the book and claim, we're relying on blockchain technology to make sure that it is transparent. It's clear from start to finish what the results are, but also understanding our commitment to reducing our footprint, how we can all do that to work together, whether it's new propulsion systems, whether it's sustainable aviation fuel, whether it's the manufacturers who are using more recyclables and are reducing their footprint as they manufacture the aircraft. This is an industry priority, and I think our commitment is really strong. Data that shows our commitment is really helpful.
Okay, final question, a nice easy one. You've all got fantastic staff and fantastic volunteers who give up hours from the industry, who give up hours, sitting on your board, chairing different working groups, working phenomenally hard. If someone wants to help but doesn't want to commit that much time, and someone's got a couple of hours, they feel like a month or every... Tim, what should they do? Because I think there's a feeling that you offer too much, and then you get, next thing you know, you're on a board or a committee.
That's right. Yeah, we all like to reel you in and suck you dry. That's what we do. No, the reality is there are policy committees. So at National Air Transportation Association, we've got a whole bunch of policy committees, and you're able to spend 2 to 3 hours a month and help shape policy. And then those on the committee that want to be sucked dry, then really raise their hands, and we work with them even more so. And I think so that's how it works at NATA. And then we also have working groups between the associations where we have members of the various associations all work together on issues like sustainable aviation fuel, for example. So that's how it works for us at NATA.
Just get in touch with us. We'll find something for you to do. We welcome all the expertise from the industry. We're in need of that expertise, whether it's technical, operational, safety, policy, environment, whatever it is. Get in touch with us. If you offer just 3 hours a month, I will ensure that we can use those 3 hours a month extremely effectively, not overburden you, and use it to the benefit of the entire industry. Don't hesitate, get in touch.
Ed?
Yeah, I think the success that our industry has had through the years has been the direct result of volunteers in our community donating their time and their expertise. And they do it because they want this industry to survive and to thrive. And when you look at the amount of talent that we're able to tap, it has let us do great things. We're able to find best practices, disseminate those, improve safety, improve security, improve professionalism, improve sustainability. But I think the key is do whatever you can, wherever you can. Anything helps, whether it's simply contacting your member of Congress with the click of a few buttons, to being proud advocates of our industry at a town hall meeting, or even in your own social circles. We are a great industry, and if we can get the millions of people who rely on our industry to say it, to believe it, and to proudly share that, we're going to be a stronger organization and a stronger industry. So do something and be proud about it, because we're part of something great.
And on a different note completely, NBAA's only got 100 exhibition slots left.
That's right. That's right. We're just about sold out in Las Vegas. So, so we are anxiously awaiting an opportunity to welcome everybody to a major live event to promote sustainability and workforce and innovation and celebrate this industry at a time when we deserve to celebrate. We've worked really hard to get where we are today.
There might even be some parties.
There might be some.
Thanks so much, guys. Always a pleasure. Athar, Tim, Ed, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Keep well.
Thank you. And thanks so much. We're now about to switch over to topic. Delighted to have Viasat. But first, let's watch this video before James appears.
Our mission is to connect the world with fast, reliable internet service wherever you go. We've been providing connectivity solutions for over 30 years. And the same great connectivity you expect at the office is also available at 40,000 feet. What's the secret? Capacity. Capacity matters. It's the backbone of a high-speed network. Think of it like the number of lanes on a highway. Viasat's network is like a smart superhighway with many lanes that automatically adds more when and where traffic demands. Powerful network capacity gives you higher speeds and a better in-flight internet experience. That's why capacity matters. Only Viasat offers the roadmap to the world's highest capacity, unparalleled in-flight internet experience. Demand for data is growing rapidly. Viasat will be there to meet that demand. And the equipment you install today is already forward compatible to take advantage of higher capacity and speeds. Because life and business don't stop at 40,000 feet. Viasat.
Welcome back to CGI Global 2021. It's June the 17th, 2021, and we're now going to look at how to make sense of cabin connectivity, options for operators, everything you need to know, but we're afraid to ask. Delighted to have James Person from Viasat, and in 20 minutes, he guarantees that you will know everything you need to know about cabin connectivity. James, is that correct?
If you say it, Al, it is absolutely correct. But I'm still distracted from listening to Ed and the others talk about NBAA in Las Vegas. I can't wait to see you and them in person, and in Miami, everybody in person. So let's get going.
It's going to be crazy, isn't it? The elbow pumping.
That's old.
Is that? I know, it's amazing. Who would have thought a year ago we'd be getting excited about something in 3 months' time from now? Right, James, cabin connectivity. To you, eat and breathe it every day. It's very simple. Most people have no idea about any of it. Is that fair?
It's pretty complicated, although that short video you just showed explained a lot about what has to happen. But you know, if I were to leave our viewers and our listeners with 3 points, I would say, one, look, we have an old saying in the U.S. that it's not your dad's old Buick, and that's because it's night and day comparison to what we used to be able to do with cabin connectivity, even just 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, cabin connectivity was very expensive, probably charged by the megabyte, and we were only able to deliver as an industry 10 to maybe hundreds of kilobits per second to the cabin. So fast forward now, 5 years later, with companies like Viasat with our high capacity satellite networks, we're able to deliver 10 megabit per second up to 100 megabit per second. And if you think about it, that's 1,000 times increase in performance, right, from just 5 years ago. And to some questions I think that were asked during the GE Aviation portion about, will prices come down? Well, absolutely, because people are still paying about the same that they paid for that connectivity 5 years ago, maybe even a little less now, but getting 1,000 times better performance. So that's the first point, is that with the high capacity Ka-band, Ku-band networks, you can do a lot more. Second, I would say is, if you have a super mid or a large cabin long range business jet, you absolutely need to be looking at these high capacity Ka-band and Ku-band satellite networks. That's what's going to give you the best performance. And finally, all other things being equal, a high capacity network is going to be better than a low capacity network. So those are kind of the 3 points people need to take away.
Okay, so a high capacity network, when you're talking about capacity, that's the bandwidth between the satellite and the antenna on the aircraft. Is that right?
Well, it's more than that. So when I'm talking about capacity, I'm talking about everything from what happens in the ground network through the gateways, which are the big ground antennas that head up, in the case of a satellite network, head up to a satellite. And then I'm talking about the actual amount of throughput that satellite can handle in one time, right? So you combine all that and then back down to your point, when you get that throughput back down to the aircraft, you have to have a high power antenna to be able to receive that information and to process it and get it to people's devices on the aircraft, which is typically by a Wi-Fi router in the cabin. But it's that whole end-to-end, as we described in the video, it's like lanes of a highway. You have to have those wide lanes or many lanes of the highway all the way through the network.
So do you have to have 1,000 satellites to have a high capacity network?
No, you don't. And so, in the Viasat case, we are today focused on geostationary satellites. And geostationary satellites, if you think about it, those are fixed in the sky relative to the Earth. They're above the equator, something like 22,000 miles above the equator. But the good thing about that altitude is that with just 3 of them, you can cover the entire world except for the poles, right? So one of the real benefits of low Earth orbit satellites, which is where the large numbers come in, has to do with being able to cover the poles. But as we've discussed earlier on your show here and elsewhere, most of that business aviation traffic happens between North America and Europe today, and that doesn't seem to be changing.
Well, I don't know. I know the Antarctic Business Aviation Association's got high hopes.
We should have them on. See,
we can get. They've got a big expo coming up in some ice airport. Okay, so the 3 rules. It's not your dad's old Buick. If you've got a big aircraft, you need to look at Ka, Ku. What are Ka and Ku?
Yeah, so, and when I say a big aircraft, both big and the super mid cabin aircraft, right? So that's something that's relatively new, is people's expectation and ability, in our case, uniquely from Viasat, to provide high speed, high capacity Ka-band service to the super mid cabin. But to your question about Ka versus Ku, so it does matter to people, but perhaps not in the way they're thinking about, right? It's a bit less about the frequency band, although there is a lot more capacity in the Ka band, and our future remains in exploiting the Ka band. But if I'm an operator making a decision about what solution to deploy, it's more about the mission of the aircraft and what certifications are available. Because whether it's our solution or other solutions, they're not all available on every aircraft. And as I mentioned, Viasat's the only provider that has Ka band in the super mid cabin. But you've got to look at what the mission of the aircraft is, how many people are flying in the aircraft, how many devices. And so to dive down into it a little bit deeper, Ku band has been commercialized longer than Ka band, right? And so it's come down the cost curve a little bit more. And what that means from an operator standpoint is they can get a little bit less expensive installation on Ku band. And so a good example of that would be, let's say you're a Challenger 604, 605 operator, or even a Gulfstream G450 operator. All of those aircraft are out of production. And, and G450 example, it comes from the factory with the Ku band radome. So that's a natural solution to be thinking about. And from one of our dealers, one of our partners who can do the installation, it starts in the mid 300s to be able to install a global high-speed satellite solution. And that's very attractive to one of those operators who we call the value-minded operators. At the other end of the spectrum, Al, you've got the people who are deciding, well, should I keep with my 4G phone or should I upgrade to 5G because it's the latest and greatest and going to give me the best speeds? And that's where Viasat Ka band fits in, because Viasat Ka band is the cream of the crop. It's got that highest capacity network, which leads to the highest speeds, which leads to the highest performance on the aircraft. And that's a different decision that people will make. Do I need that highest performance to the aircraft?
And people who bought Ku band 5 years ago, at the time it was the fastest. That's right, isn't it? And now they're going, oh, I should have bought Ka. Is there something else out there that will replace Ka in a few years? Or have we run out of spectrum?
No, we haven't run out of spectrum, but the bands being deployed right now for biz aviation satellite, and I'm leaving alone the older L-band solutions, right? Because we wouldn't consider those high speed or high capacity today. Those are still measured in the tens or hundreds of kilobits per second. But there are L-band satellite solutions. But if you want high speed, and by high speed in today's language, we're talking tens of megabits per second to the cabin, or like I said, maybe up to 100 megabits per second, you're looking at Ku band or Ka band. And in Viasat's case, what we did is we designed our Ka band hardware to be a direct drop-in replacement for the Ku band hardware. So it's the same footprint, same 3 LRUs. And what we've seen, literally an operator who's ready to upgrade, who wants to upgrade if they need to, can take off the Viasat 3 LRUs, put in the Viasat Ka band LRUs, replace the radome because it has to go from Ku to Ka, and then they have an upgraded solution. But beyond that, there are other frequency bands the government's looking at, X band and others, but those haven't been commercialized, and I wouldn't expect to see anything in those bands for another decade or longer.
And ground-based, AirTG, you should just have that anyway.
Not necessarily. So, going back to that point about 5 years ago, how people used to operate, a typical US operator might have an ATG, a ground-based solution, and then use an L-band solution for those rare trips or any trips they had outside of North America. So when you look at ground-based solutions, these air-to-ground solutions, think of them as cell sites that instead of point to the ground, they're pointing up, right? So they can only operate over land. And today that's for business aviation only available in North America. And to prevent interference with their ground-based counterparts, whether it's a cellular network or a Wi-Fi network, they have to turn off when they're on the ground or near the ground. So in a business jet, you can't use it until you're at altitude, either 3,000 feet or 10,000 feet. So if you get down to a super mid-cabin aircraft, which are now approved and do operate over the Atlantic or go to the Caribbean, you don't need to have two separate solutions anymore. In fact, we've got, I heard yesterday from one of our OEM partners who offers both an ATG solution on their aircraft from the factory or the Viasat Ka-band solution, that when their pilots, their test pilots and delivery pilots are doing ferry deliveries, they're all wanting to go on the flights that have Viasat Ka-band equipped on it. They no longer want to go on the other aircraft. So even the crew is demanding it. So that's an advantage of going with a satellite solution. You don't have to be limited to just the US, and you can use it over the water as well.
So I think one of the things people get confused about is the different companies. So what's Viasat's role when it comes to the cabin connectivity?
So we have two roles, and that's where it gets a little confusing, because some people want to say, well, Viasat, you're a satellite operator. True. So one of Viasat's roles is we design and build the highest capacity satellites in the world. And so we're on our fourth generation, about to launch the fourth generation. We've had satellites in place measured in the tens of gigabits per second capacity for 15 or more years. But we build larger and larger ones each time. Viasat 1 was measured in the hundreds of gigabits per second. Then Viasat 2 is several hundred gigabits per second. And Viasat 3, as you see here, they'll be measured in a terabit per second. So when those three launch. So that's one of our roles on the satellite side. In addition, Viasat is a provider of the hardware on your aircraft. And the advantage of that for an operator is that we designed the hardware, the Viasat K-band hardware that goes on the aircraft today, to be future-proofed. So by the time we get to those Viasat 3 satellites next year, it will not only work on our future satellites, but it will be able to take advantage of all the advances that are coming with that.
Okay, so I've got a question. You showed the map, and I've got a question from Neil Kamath. There used to be a difference in worldwide coverage between KA band and KU band a few years ago. Is the geographical coverage about the same nowadays?
Yeah, it depends on the provider. So Viasat KA band coverage, if you look at it today, we cover North and Central America, the Caribbean, the North Atlantic tracts, and Europe. And that's, as we discussed before, that's where 85% of business aviation traffic happens today. That's where all the flight hours happen. So that's why we put that there first. But by next year, when we launch 2 Viasat 3 satellites, we'll cover 2/3 of the world with our additional KA band. And then by the time we launch the 3rd Viasat 3 satellite, we'll cover Asia Pacific and have the whole world covered. In addition to that, and if you go back to the slide on our 3 hardware solutions, we have a KU band solution that's already global, right? And then we have some operators who choose dual band. We have large cabin operators in the high-tech industries or in banking industries that want, as we say here, the best of both worlds. So they always want to be connected. They want to make sure they have a backup system, and they choose the dual band solution. So from a Viasat perspective, on the hardware side, we offer KA band, we offer KU band, and we offer dual band as well.
You don't do every aircraft size, do you?
We don't do every aircraft type. However, if you have a super mid or large cabin, long range aircraft, we do basically all of those. And by super mids, I'm talking about the Embraer Praetors, the new Praetor 500 and 600, their legacy 450 and 500s. The Bombardier Challenger 300 and 350s, the Gulfstream G280, and all of their larger brethren as well. We do all of those. We just had, I'm surprised you haven't asked about it yet, Al. We had some news this morning, right, that you saw.
It's my next question. Can you give me an example of operators you work with?
Sure, and teeing up the news that we sent your way and put out on the wire this morning is one of our fleet operators is FlexJet. So FlexJet, of course, the fractional operator based in the US, but also with the fleet in Europe. They are deploying the Viasat solutions across 4 different airframes, whether it's their Bombardier, their Gulfstream, and their Embraer aircraft on 2 different continents. And they've chosen our KU band, what we call KU Advanced, but they've also chosen the Viasat KA band as well. And over time, as the press release talks, they'll likely deploy KA band, Viasat KA band on all of their fleet.
No, it's a great win, and FlexJet, a fantastic company. What type of performance can you expect if you sign up?
So performance-wise with Viasat, I mean, it's the best in the industry, period. We don't shy away from numbers. Other people might talk platitudes about, getting reliable coverage. But for us, it's all about what we can do for the cabin and also for people in the cockpit. I think as many of our viewers here know, we uncapped our speeds a year ago. And by uncapping the speeds, we can get very high speeds to the cabin. And that very high speed, driven by our capacity, means great experience in the cockpit and also in the cabin. We had one operator whose IT department, and we're showing the results here, they did an extensive test, and these were on super mid-cabin aircraft. And they were seeing, as you see here, more than 90 megabits to the cabin. And what they were able to do was 30 devices connected simultaneously, and also 5 simultaneous HD streams. So it's really fast. And this is what people are asking for when they ask for Viasat Ka-band. It's because we can do this.
But this is on an aircraft with 5 people on it.
But each, think about a person who has his cell phone, has his laptop, and has an iPad. So that's 15 devices right there. And then the crew's got a couple of devices each. So it's not uncommon for us to see that number of devices on a super mid cabin.
No, I guess not. It just seems like an astonishing number. James, what have we got to look forward to? What's the future?
Well, the future is additional capacity. I mean, Viasat, we already operate 4 overlaid Ka-band satellites over North America. But as I mentioned, with Viasat 3 coming, we'll cover the globe with our high-speed Ka-band network. And we're already down serving the super mid-cabin, but we and others in the industry are working on flat panel antennas that will open it up for even smaller aircraft. So those smaller Cessnas, even turboprops being able to take advantage of our high speeds as well. So it keeps getting better for people flying an aircraft with their connectivity.
Okay, 2 very quick questions. One from Neil Kamath. Is there a weight penalty for a dual band solution?
Well, fortunately, with only 3 LRUs, it's pretty light already. And so it's really just a space issue. So the large cabin Gulfstreams, G550s, G650s, and the Bombardier Globals can all support this. And in many cases, they already have 2 antennas up there anyway for TV or for internet. So no, weight isn't the issue at all.
Okay, final question, which is a hard one from an anonymous user. Is any of this Wi-Fi communication subject to federal or state communication tax? I know Illinois has pressed this for certain plane-to-ground phone calls.
I'm not exactly sure what that question means, but we do have areas of the world where we're not allowed to operate different frequency bands on the ground, and so we comply with that. But state by state, I'm not aware of any U.S. state issues that have any restrictions. But ours is satellite, and throughout the U.S., there are no issues on the ground or in any phase of flight to operate the Viasat solutions.
James, great talking to you. Look forward to seeing you face to face, hopefully this year, touch wood.
Can't wait to see you and everyone else, Al.
Cheers, James. Take care.
Bye.
And now we're going to jump from connectivity to finance. Delighted to have 3 experts from all over North America: Don Walsh from Stonebriar, Keith Hayes from PNC Aviation Finance, and Isabelle Lafond from LBC Capital. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon.
Hi, Don, this is good for you. Normally, we make you get up at 4 in the morning.
Yeah, no, I like the time zone. I appreciate it.
And Keith, still love the diagram in the background. And Isabelle, how are you?
Doing good, doing good.
Great. So, Keith, how's business?
You know what? Business is as good as ever, it seems like, Al. And first of all, thank you very much for once again including us in your session. They're always awesome. But business it was hot the first of last year. It slowed down for May, June, July, and then picked back up in August. And it went through the end of the year, and everyone thought things would start slowing down, but we haven't seen a slowdown whatsoever. Our first quarter was busier year over year than the prior first quarter, and it remains extremely busy. This June seems like a December year end. Our operations team and underwriting team are like saying, please stop, and the sales team was saying, please go, go, go. But no, it's good. I think our only fear right now is everyone's, and that's just at what point in time could potential shortfall of used aircraft come into play. But now it's really busy, Al.
Don?
Our year started very strong, largely in part to spillover from a busy fourth quarter. And I would say since we've been steady, but not quite as busy as Keith's group's been. I think for us, part of that, is our forte leans large cabin and non-bank obligor profile, right? And so that doesn't line up with most typical U.S. buyers, right, at present. But it's more, our growth opportunity's been more in overseas markets with that product, and I think the signs are those markets will be recovering later in the year. So I think our hope, our expectation is in terms of volume originations would be more of a second half of the year thing.
And that's partly done because you guys don't want to compete in the US market against the much more competitive US market. Is that right?
Yeah, in a way, the user base is diverse enough. There are situations in North America that fit us, right? And we're happy to do them, but generally we're not designed to compete, head on with banks, right? We're more looking to fill gaps where they aren't, right? So that's true.
Isabelle, what about LBC Capital? What are you seeing at the moment?
So for those who don't know LBC Capital, we're part of Laurentian Bank, which is a Canadian bank that's basically 175 years old this year and listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So through LBC Capital, we're able to do aircraft deals in Canada and in the US. So our main, most of our clients are Canadian C-Reg aircraft. We've been starting to do a few US deals. So, we're not truly competitors in the US as well. But yeah, I echo what Keith was saying. We've been super busy. I was actually telling my boss last week, this is like December 2019 level of activity we're seeing. It's quite nice. It's been steady, I guess I would say, as of last summer, a year ago. It's been steady, but now we're seeing just, really a lot of activity. And some of it is also refinancing opportunities. So, we're in a low interest rate reality. So we get often requests. I would say half of our requests are for refinancing. So that keeps us busy as well as pre-owned aircraft. So not so much new aircraft deliveries. I think the Canadian market's not a type of market that would go for brand new, maybe occasionally, but not typically. So mostly pre-owned.
And you're relatively.
So we do helicopter. Sorry.
No, it's my fault. Sorry, you keep going.
Yeah, I was saying we also do helicopters. So helicopters, and we've also looked at cargo. Commercial. So we're a little bit diversified as what we look for.
And you're relatively new in aircraft finance, aren't you? You've been as an institution.
Yes. So that's right. So my senior management comes from GE Capital Canada. So they basically bought CIT Canada's portfolio for equipment in 2016. So that's really when GE Capital Canada exited the market. then they basically they went to Laurentian Bank and then bought CIT Canada. So that's when the LBC Capital launched, and that's 5 years now. So we're relatively new, but I think the team has experience. So we were around in 2008 and pre-2008. So we're quite prudent as to our view. Yes, we want to grow, but we're also selective as to what risks we're taking because we've all been there before, and we know what can happen, what can go wrong.
And the good thing is you've been doing it for a while. They've been doing it long enough to realise this isn't a standard market. Keith, you as a bank specialise in taking people up the chain, don't you? You often start with small aircraft and get them up to jets. Have you seen many new buyers, new concept buyers who haven't had aircraft before?
You know, Al, we have seen a number, and last year especially, we did see a number of new buyers, and it's everything from the owner-flown used to the ultra-long-range new, which is, you think about a first-time buyer buying a $70 million airplane, and it's pretty insane. What we found more times than not, as we got to know our clients and went through the due diligence, most of them had some experience with private flying in the past, whether it's charter, whether it's jet card, whether it's a small fractional share. But we did see a fair amount of, American Airlines first class flyers going to full ownership. So we haven't seen as much this year as we actually saw last year. It'll be interesting to see how it continues to flow, but yes, we did see a fair amount of it. And I don't want this to become a PNC commercial for sure. But we all know as you move into ownership for the first time, there's a lot of moving parts. And we saw a lot of customers asking a lot of questions, whether it's what attorney should I talk to, what management company should I talk to, what broker should I talk to. And the finance piece of it can also be a big challenge. So we had a lot of clients that were very interested in our non-financial disclosure, very limited recourse product because it was so simple. It was like, okay, I've got 6 boxes to check and 5 of them are super complicated. If I can make one easy, then that's a great thing. So we did see a lot of asset-based financing in the space.
And those passengers, the customer who went from American Airlines to buying an aircraft, they actually bought one in the end.
We did see a number of them end up that did buy. Yes, it was crazy. And like I said, we did have a global 7,500 prospect that had never owned an airplane that went forward and bought a brand new global. So as crazy as it is happening. And, I think one thing that'll be interesting to see is 2 to 3 years from now, do they still think that, if they end up only flying 150 hours a year, is that the most efficient way for them to travel? The reasoning behind it was obvious with the pandemic and the concern with the family, the availability of flights to where they needed to go. It made a lot of sense. And I'm confident they're gonna stay as owners of corporate aircraft and move through the system. But time will tell on how some of this play out.
That's astonishing. You hear about there's no shortage of people who fly business class or first class and look into it, but usually they're like, "What? How much?" Don, have you converted anyone from Southwest?
No, not yet. Not yet.
But have you seen new buyers?
We have. As I was alluding before, right? The typical U.S. first-time buyer, like Keith was mentioning, doesn't line up that well with what we offer. So in those cases, we wind up referring those to the sources we think where it fits best, based on the airplane and credit as we understand it. There have been cases where we've been the proper fit, and it's been a little surprising to me. In non-US markets we've talked to, or had some contact in some first buyer situations, and it's been for larger airplanes, but I think that's more common, in non-US emerging market spaces where the first airplane would be a larger airplane. So.
You've actually had a significant number of first-time buyers in Asia and around the world, though, haven't you, in the past?
We have, right. Yep.
Isabelle, are you seeing, I see Canada as a very mature market like the US. Have you also had first-time guys coming to you?
So yes, we've had basically a lot of discussions with first-time buyer concept buyers. I think most of the ones we've talked to were looking to partner with a friend, a business partner, and sometimes up to 3 business partners. So that changed a bit our discussion, or regular discussion with prospects, because now it makes, instead of looking at one set of financials, you're looking at 2 or 3 or 4 sets of financial statements. And then you also get into the type of discussion where you're saying, well, what's your shareholder agreement? We as a bank want to make sure there's not a utilization fight. So I think for us, yes, they were sold to the aircraft and the utilization and the need for it. It was more that they had a tough time swallowing the cost, or the cost of the aircraft, the utilization, and the fixed fees the first time. So they try to share that with other ones. So yeah, we've asked to see the shareholder agreements. We're a little bit more hand-holding, referring them to, I always like to refer them to tax advisors, counsel, and to really make up their mind as a group as what's best for them. So that's the type of first-time buyer we saw.
You all play in very different markets, and you've all. It's quite nice. I wouldn't see all 3 of you as any of you competing particularly with each other. Don, how competitive is the market you play in? Largely international deals. Are you seeing any new names, or is it the same as it's been for the last few years?
I think there are new names in the U.S. market for sure. Internationally, I'm not sensing it, but it wouldn't surprise me. What I think, as busy as some of, the mainstream U.S. providers are, right? I think the overall financial markets are even hotter than the aircraft market is, right? And so, the demand for assets and investments is high, right? So they wouldn't be surprised, right, to see more groups, and it creates all sorts of dynamics around what all of us do, right? There's much more cash, right, on personal and corporate balance sheets than before, right? So cash competes harder than it used to, and it was already hard, right? And then different forms of corporate debt, right? There's been a big rebound in that, right? And so we, that's been a competitor in a couple spots for us where it wasn't before. So there's a lot happening. Yeah.
Keith, cash is always your toughest competitor?
Cash is king, but it also probably makes the least sense on a non-earning asset. So it's always the biggest mental challenge of why somebody would pay cash, and especially when rates are as competitive as they are today. But we do the overall question on the level of competition. If you follow any bank stocks, if you read the press releases, to Don's point, liquidity is extremely high, and the goal of banks is to deploy this liquidity, deploy the capital, and corporate aircraft are large, fully funded loans day one, and they move the needle. So there is a lot of competition. Most everyone that has, whether it's a finance company or a bank that has a dedicated aviation team, they're extremely active. When pandemic hit, spreads went up because of the uncertainty that was going to take place. I think virtually everywhere, while there's still some level of uncertainty, there's also a high level of normalization, and spreads have compressed back down to, I would almost say, close to the pre-pandemic level. Not necessarily as low, but it's getting there. So rates are extremely attractive. The other question you ask is, are we seeing other people enter the marketplace? And we are. And I think that's healthy. I think that's good for buyers to have opportunities for their local banks to get involved. I will share that one aspect that we see on some of the local regional banks that I think buyers have to be extremely careful on, and you don't see it as often with firms that have committed dedicated aviation verticals. The small regional guys, and you said it earlier, they haven't lived through a cycle. It may be a value cycle or it's simply an ownership cycle. And so when they go to their clients and they say, we offer 95 to 100% financing, we offer 18 to 20 year amortizations, that sounds extremely attractive, especially for a young buyer, an early buyer. But when that buyer goes through its typical life cycle, in 3.5 to 4 years, he or she wants a different airplane, and they're underwater on their current financing, it's going to be an unpleasant situation. So, and you don't see that as often with committed long-term aviation finance companies. So that's the only thing I would share in that space. It's all good, it's all healthy, but I think questions are warranted.
Does it feel rational to you though at the moment, Keith? It's not crazy on the whole. Like the established banks aren't, going crazy at the moment.
I think it remains healthy. It remains healthy. There's been a slight uptick on operating lease request. And in general, what we're seeing is virtually everyone's fairly close to each other. You're not seeing institutions that are just doing things that are just way out of bounds. Generally speaking, on debt transactions, you're not seeing institutions that are way out of bounds. What usually comes into play that makes one institution propose and structure something that's significantly different than maybe one other one is relationships.
Yeah, it's the private banks running it.
Yes, yeah, which makes sense. And so I wouldn't say that anybody's doing something that's unhealthy. It's just they have the ability to structure something slightly different than what the remainder of the competitors might be able to do.
Isabelle, how different do you find the Canadian market and the US market for competition?
Obviously there's some American lenders that lend in Canada, PNC being one of them. But generally, I think Canada is a big country. It's a wide country, but we know most of the buyers. So most of the banks know most of the high net worth individuals, the large corporates. So our competitors in most cases are the relationship lenders and cash, right? And also a bit in context with the discussions we had earlier today, some buyers just want to jump on an available aircraft and won't want to arrange the financing for 3-4 weeks. So they're just going to pay cash and maybe down the road look at refinancing it. But we're seeing that if they really want that aircraft, they're going to just pay cash.
That's a great point you've brought up, where we've had in the broker panel, we had brokers complaining, or some brokers, not all, because some of them probably have inventory loans from you guys and wouldn't want to upset you. But we have complaining about the time it takes to get a financing closed. And particularly in a hot market when you're trying to get an aircraft. Don, is that a fair criticism?
I mean, I can't speak for others, but on our side, nothing's changed. You know, the normal timelines, you know, can be very compressed for repeat customers, but, you know, start brand new customer, you know, depending, you know, how complicated the deal, the timelines haven't changed, you know, somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks for a domestic deal and maybe 4 and 6 for an overseas deal.
Isabelle, do you have a target time?
It really depends, but I would say 3 to 4 weeks is really what we aim for. I mean, most of the time we wait for our prospect to share information. So if you put that on a fast track, then yes, we can do that quickly. But our timeline hasn't changed either.
I think that's a very fair point, is that how many buyers are very slow getting KYC and accounting. Keith, you guys pride yourselves on quick deals, don't you?
It depends on our asset-based deals. You can turn those much quicker than you can a traditional credit underwritten deal. A traditional credit underwritten deal, we're in the exact same position that Isabelle and Don are in. It's going to be 3 weeks plus or minus. I am confident if you went back and looked at any of the tapes out of your any of your webinars that I've attended, I've said the same thing over and over, and that's come often and come early. We see on a regular basis, our clients, they look for a plane, they know they're going to finance it. Then they put it in pre-buy, and then it's in pre-buy for a week, and then it's coming out, and then they come to us and say, can you close in a week and a half? And there is no shortcuts. And so if they were to simply come before they started, provide the financials and let us get started, it's just a smoother experience for everyone involved. And I share that with our broker friends as they continue to educate. We share it with our attorneys as we continue to educate. There's just the KYC portion and the due diligence. There's just nothing that you can shortcut. There's nothing that you can just lay aside.
I was talking to a lawyer who was saying that they often get the number of clients they have coming to them going, I'm buying this aircraft. And the lawyer's like, okay, do you want what about finance? No, we're a cash buyer. And then suddenly they're like, actually, do you know, I think we will do it. Like, you could have told me. It always becomes a financing. Isabelle, you used to work at a manufacturer, and manufacturers are now, they cut production last year. We did a great job of adapting, all of them, to COVID, cut production. Numbers are going to be down this year. And we're getting a hint that they want to raise production, but they're not looking to go crazy. Are you slightly conflicted as a financier, where you'd like to have more deal flow, more aircraft coming, but also you don't want them to damage residual values? Is it a balance?
Yes, you hit the spot there. It's a balance. And I mean, like you said, the OEMs did a great job last year taking the tough decision to right-size the production line, and this was not the case in 2008, 2009. So it's difficult for employees, for families of those employees. It's easy to cut production, but it's hard to ramp up production. It's a bit like credit rating agencies, right? It's easy to drop. It's hard to kicking back on again. So, I mean, yes, I think preserving the residual values is key to our industry. OEMs still do a fantastic job with investments in innovation and new technology, and that's what new buyers of new aircraft, that's what they want. That's why they replace every 5 years, or that's why they'll buy a Global 7500, because it's the biggest and the best aircraft to their view. So, and then you have all the sustainability and the green aircraft that the new generation of buyers want to buy. So So we'll still need them, and hopefully the market adjusts and stabilizes with once production ramps back up.
Don, you guys track residuals religiously. Are you slightly worried that manufacturers might be tempted to get carried away, or are you pretty comfortable at the moment?
I mean, I think the way you said it, right? If it was measured, all the metrics you would track, right, in this accelerated environment we're in, would say they should, right? I mean, the old adage of flight activity is a precursor to pre-owned activity, and pre-owned activities are precursor to new airplane orders. I mean, those statistics are all there, right? They all suggest that production should increase. And, we've had front row seats and seen, buyers struggle to secure, desirable airplanes. And we've seen, sellers overachieve, in this market. And those situations really seem to feel like, if there was a new airplane option, that would be the way the buyer would want to go, right? So, if, we all know there's certain models where the pre-owned price is, narrowing the gap to the new one, right? And it's probably in those models where there could be more comfort and increased production. If it were in the ones where the gap is still wide, right, that wouldn't be prudent, and that wouldn't benefit the market, right? But it's an interesting question, right? And it's interesting we're even talking about it now, because I think, from the crisis time, the thing the industry's been grappling with is price stability, right? And then in the long range market, where we're mostly in 17, 18, 19, it seemed like we had reached like a level of manageable depreciation rates, right? And then the OEMs had a good solid year, right, for deliveries in 19. And so it was like maybe we're turning that corner, right, that the existing demand was absorbing the existing fleet enough. And then COVID happened, right? And then, steep depreciation rates for 1 year. We're merging out, all those losses are recovered. So, has COVID, pushed us into that price stability, sustainable period that we've been all hoping for? It's probably too early to say, right? But it's interesting that could be the atmosphere we're in, right? So.
Don, if you were an OEM, would you be raising production now?
I mean, I think, they, like I say, right, they're in the best position to know, which models at what level of demand, right? So in those ones, I think it's worth a try. Yeah.
I would. If it was me, I'd be optimistic. I'd be ramping up. If I'm honest. Keith, what about you?
You know what? If you look at all the components, which most Isabelle and Don have already kind of spoke on, inventory levels are single digit, values have stabilized. It's getting difficult to get good late model used airplanes. More times than not, when you sell a new plane, there's a very good chance another used plane has come on the market, which is needed. So I think as long as the OEMs stay disciplined with price, didn't overproduce and get excess inventory, thus have to drop price, that would be, you pointed earlier with the residuals. I do think there's room in the market to increase production to a certain level for virtually all OEMs.
Deep question for you, Keith. Culturally, you've been in the industry a long time. Culturally, the people running OEMs are actually very different to the ones who were running OEMs up until the global financial crisis, where they were mainly led by salespeople. Now, I can't think of one that's led by, unless maybe you take Michael, who's really a finance person, but Thierry's a finance person. Now, do you think culturally it's a very different environment for OEMs?
what a great question, and I'm not sure that I'm the person necessarily to answer it. But I will say that the answer is probably yes, but I would say that they seem to be very open, even more open than in the past, to feedback, advice, data from their partners. Whether it's Michael with his key players events, whether it's everyone, they all have key players, whether it's clients, whether it's finance, whether it's brokers, whether it's dealers. They seem to want to make sure they're partnering and getting feedback across the board, and not working in a vacuum. And I think that's extremely positive, and I think it creates a great partnership.
Don or Isabelle, any comments on the culture of OEMs? Isabelle, you're feeling conflicted as a former one. Don, do you think it's changed as an industry?
I mean, I agree with everything Keith said. None of us exist without them, right? They're in a hard spot, right? They make the big investments and innovations that keep buzz right in the market. So, and I think they do a great job. But to your question, I mean, I have had customers who are longtime customers of certain brands, and they will say to me, "Oh, it's changed. It's not the same." And to me, in a way, that means, the customer's not able to negotiate for what they're not getting everything they want, right? And so, hard to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose everything changes. Like finance has changed probably more than any other industry in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just checking the Q&A from the audience. Your job has been amazing. Like 12 months ago, none of us thought this is what the market would look like. Isabelle, what's the biggest thing you've learned in the last 12 months? The biggest lesson?
I think basically is that what we're doing it right, because all our clients continued paying. We didn't have any defaults. So I think we basically continue on that and look to the future. Yeah.
Don?
What's the last 12 months been like?
Biggest lesson you've learned?
Biggest lesson? I mean, when I think of that, right, like at the beginning of the pandemic, there were like sort of a range of opinions, right? There was a doomsday camp, right? This is 2008 all over again. And there was, the more optimistic that on balance, this would be positive for our industry, right? And, lo and behold, the optimists were right, and, that's a good thing. And like Isabelle said, it does bode well for the future of our industry.
I was much more pessimistic, but being pessimistic, being pessimistic, I think the trouble is when you think the optimists are right, you've got something else going wrong coming next. Keith, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 12 months?
I think I could break it down kind of twofold. One is external, and one's internal of businesses. One of them is, generally speaking, history always repeats itself. Okay, but history didn't repeat itself this time. And in 08, 09, values dropped. Inventories went to double digits. Bank repossessions and defaults skyrocketed. And it took a significant amount of time for the market to correct. This, with the economic downturn that nobody foresaw, well, nobody saw it really coming in 08 either, but through the pandemic, the market slowed down, but only for a relatively short period of time. Values as a whole didn't drop more than they normally would have depreciated, other than maybe some large cabin. And activity levels picked back up in a fairly short period of time. And I think there's a couple things that happened. One of which I think we can applaud our dealer brokers and OEMs. Special hats off to IATA. They stayed extremely disciplined. Buyers that wanted to sell, buyers thought, geez, we've got to drop price. But there were no, sellers, but there were no buyers. And like IATA, they said, there's no reason to drop price if there's not a buyer. Let's stay firm. And I think that discipline is what allowed the values to stay where they kind of remain where they were to almost a normal depreciation level. So that's one thing. And then second, I believe more on the internal side, and we saw it at PNC, but I think so many businesses saw it. And it's something that without the pandemic, we would have never realized. And that is when you got just super great people on your team, when you have good processes in place, when you have good procedures in place, you can withstand something that you can never think that you could possibly withstand. The level of communication that you have that maybe you took for granted, but all of a sudden you're like, you can't take it for granted anymore because everyone's working from home and they never thought they would do it. And then ultimately staying very customer focused, customer centric. But I just think that so many businesses learned that we can do things we never thought we could do, because at the end of the day, we've got the best team that we could ever put together. And those teams bonded and they joined at the hip and they stuck to the process and the procedures. And they, I know we missed a few beats, but we didn't miss a lot of beats. And I think a lot of companies would say the same thing.
Fantastic. That's a really nice, optimistic way to end. Thank you so much, Don Walsh from Stonebriar, Keith Hayes from PNC Aviation Finance, and Isabelle Lafond from LVC Capital. Great seeing you all, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Al.
Thanks, Al. Great job.
No, thank you. And now we're going to go to a quick message from Bombardier, and then we'll be back looking at green aviation. Welcome back to Corporate Jet Investor Global 2021. We started at 5 p.m. in Australia. We're now 8 o'clock, coming up to 8 o'clock in Europe, 9 o'clock in France, but still peak time in America. And we're now going to cover probably the biggest issue facing business aviation for the next few years, sustainability. We've got a fantastic panel who I'd like to introduce as we look at green business jets. Delighted to have Andreea Moyes from Air BP, Kennedy Ricci from 4Air, Leo Knaapen from Bombardier, and Nicole Kappos from Pratt & Whitney Canada. Yeah, and we're going to go through and look at the biggest issues. Hi guys, how are you?
Hi.
We've got everyone here. Andreea, are you on holiday at the moment? Andreea, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Hopefully you can hear me as well.
Are you on vacation at the moment?
I am, yes.
I can't believe we're ruining your vacation. This is beyond...
I'm just using the lunch break to speak with this prestigious audience and colleagues, and we'll return back to it shortly.
Yeah, this is beyond the Call of Duty. Nicole, let's start with you. I don't know, lots of people today have talked about sustainability. We had Ed Bolen and Tim and Athar saying it was one of the biggest issues. You've been in the industry a long time. Do you see this as a turning point?
Well, I actually listened to Ed and Athar and earlier and Tim, and absolutely, I think there is no doubt that sustainability is increasingly top of mind, and everybody, including aircraft operators, OEMs, we're all seeking a way on how we're going to play an active role and contribute. We've definitely seen a rise in the sustainable practices, the solutions that are available out there from our a lot of inquiries from our operators, and I think we've all seen increases in both government regulations and incentives at the same time. And I think despite the pandemic and its impact on our industry, sustainable practices are being embraced by many of these recovering organizations, and I think it's here to stay. Whether now is the turning point or it happens to be in the coming years, it should not stop us from pushing forward and pursuing some of these sustainable initiatives. And at this point, there's no turning back. I think that ship has sailed. And if I just do a small comparison, at Pratt & Whitney, we've had a roadmap for sustainability for years. I'd say now we're looking at it with more of a renewed focus over the last few years, and even at the Raytheon Technologies level, we've always held a strong position regarding the environment. We continue to work on the different pillars for sustainability, whether it's reducing our carbon footprint or coming to market with a carbon offset program or doing additional research on SAF. We've been doing research since 2006 and continue to do so. And then there's the technology pillar, right? Do we continue to invest in next generation technologies across our engine portfolio, like the electric and the hybrid electric and the hydrogen powered propulsion system? So I think, as I mentioned earlier, that ship has sailed and there's no turning back right now.
That's brilliant. Leo, you're head of industry affairs at Bombardier, and I know that you personally have been involved in sustainable aviation for many years. Do you feel that there's a sea change, that something's happened in the last year to 18 months where it's suddenly front and center?
Yes, there's no doubt about that, Al. I'd go back even a bit further than that. I'd say probably about 5 years ago, it started becoming apparent with flight shaming gaining momentum. It's become perhaps more of a pointed stick, gone down a little bit from the commercial side due to COVID and its impact on commercial aviation and traffic. But what we do see is increased interest from the public at large, constant microscopic type analysis or conjecture by the media. We are also seeing increasingly from investment community and from corporations an understanding of what Bombardier is doing, what the industry is doing, and what the operators of aircraft are doing to respect sustainability, and including via various methods, whether it's the World Economic Forum, whether it's the UN Global Compact. It's now become front burner. There's no doubt about that.
Kennedy, you launched 4Air last year, and I'm sure everyone on the call knows about you guys. You made a lot of headlines, but do you want to just explain it briefly?
Yeah, and I think, so a little bit of background on 4Air. We kind of looked at, there's so many topics of sustainability in the industry. There's carbon offsets, there's sustainable fuels, there's these, talks of new propulsion. So for people to figure out, how do they get involved? Where do they start? We wanted to help build out kind of a framework for it and help them, kind of navigate the sustainability journey.
And you've signed up some large number of operators is it what in the lessons? It's definitely less than a year, isn't it? In 9 months as you launched.
Yes. Yeah.
Who have you got?
Let's see. We've got FlexJet and Clay Lacy, JetLinks. We recently announced a partnership with Sentient Jet. We'll be announcing one of our helicopter partners here in a couple of weeks. So we just, really been a reflection of the demand, I think, and the enthusiasm for a lot of these sustainability, initiatives. and really helping to distill it in an easy way for people, helping them to, on an individual basis, become more involved in the sustainability journey.
And are you being led by operators or their customers? Who's leading this?
I think it's a little bit of both. There's certainly kind of a top-down push for sustainability from operators. I kind of see it's external pressures on both ends. From one side, on the corporate level, the operator level, there's push from investors from kind of larger corporate goals to have their flight departments align with their sustainability goals. So you kind of have these programs coming out from the companies, building out larger commitments as an organization. But on the other side, it's being driven by the end users, by individual flyers who, especially in Europe, the conversation is a little farther, I think, than in North America about being conscious of what private aviation's footprint is on your personal footprint. People's families kind of asking about what the principals are doing for sustainability. I even had a pilot reach out last week who has been outside of the industry for a while. They wanted to get back into it, but they were worried about what flying would do for its climate impact. So what could they kind of do just as an individual pilot to offset or to engage in sustainability? So it's both ends. It's from the operators and from the end customers.
Andreea, EBP and BP has been working on SAF for a long time. And it's not like you've suddenly decided that this was an area for you. You've been investing in it for many years. Have you felt that something's just changed in the last few months or years?
Absolutely. We supplied the first SAF airplane in 2008, and it feels like there was a little bit of activity for a long time, and all of a sudden in the last 2 years, the pace of change has accelerated tremendously. You only have to look at all the commitments that have been made to net zero in the last 2 years, and even during COVID, this seems to have taken off significantly. We speak with not just airlines. This is what's interesting right now. There's new parties coming to ask for sustainable aviation fuel. We speak with cities, airports, corporations, cargo companies, and customers. So there's a lot of activity, and there's a new ecosystem of parties that are coming to ask for sustainable aviation fuel. In BP, we announced our own ambitions for net zero by 2050 last year. And we are actively working on creating a new integrated energy company that produces low carbon products for our customers. For aviation specifically, last few months, actually understanding exactly what are the pathways, how is the aviation sector meant to decarbonize, and how can we contribute, where are our strengths to bring to this journey. So the pace of change is absolutely tremendous in the last year or so.
Leo, is this a top-down OEMs and pushing it, or bottom-up green revolution?
I think part of it did start with OEMs. It's always been in our DNA, whether we're an engine or power plant manufacturer or an aircraft manufacturer. It's always been part of our DNA to lower our fuel consumption. And we've done that quite significantly over the last 40 to 50 years with an total SFC reduction in the area of 38 to 42%. So it's something that we do naturally all the time, whether it's with new aircraft design or new power plant design. What's really happened, I think, is about 6 years ago, the manufacturing community led by Gamma, who we referred to earlier, started looking at this. We could see that, and Bombardier was engaged in that quite a bit, and so was Rolls-Royce and Gulfstream, and all of us, we banded together, and we could see that there was a need, that there was a storm on the horizon, and there was a need to start assuring operators and FBOs that aircraft were safe to fly with SAF, which indeed they are, of course. And it took a couple of years to educate this community about it. And then we started at the same time turning a chapter, I would say. And you mentioned how we turned the corner. Perhaps that corner was turned about a year, well, not even so, 9 months ago at the summit that Ed Bolen referred to earlier in Washington, where we basically didn't stop, but lessened the education impact and started focusing more on affordability and availability and ways to stimulate and improve the refining. We obviously need a lot more fuel. There is no doubt that it's going to take a Herculean effort over the next 30 to 35 years. So I'll throw a number out at you, which is being published repeatedly before. We need, as in civil aviation, commercial aviation, the cargo passenger, as well as private or business aviation, we need approximately 450 to 500 million tons of SAF per year by 2050 in order to achieve our goals. That's a lot of fuel. And of course, most of it will go to the airline community, but a lot of it has to be used by business aviation as well. Well, there's a reality or a realization from the fuel refiners, the fuel providers like Air BP and World Fuel Services and Avfuel and others, that we need to band together. We're all in this together, to steal Tim Obitts' phrase, but it's entirely accurate. So I think it started with the OEMs, but it's now very much a group effort.
Okay, we'll come back to that figure of 400 million. Nicole, who do you think's leading it? Because you brought out an innovative carbon offset policy last year, but that was led by, I got the impression that was led by you guys rather than customers demanding it.
Oh, I know, absolutely. I think a bit like what Leo was saying, I think it's within our DNA to be able to do our part in it. And we go out there and we talk to our customers as well and see, what some of their expectations are. But there's no question that our customers are becoming increasingly curious and eager to have solutions on sustainability. So we went to market at the end of last year with a carbon offset service for our turbofan customers. And I'll be quite honest, we don't have the uptake that we thought we would have had by this point. We have a lot of customers that are still in the education stage, are trying to find out what is this all about. Yes, everyone's on board. There's no doubt. Everybody's on the bandwagon. However, not everybody is on board yet to actually, financially pay for this extra service. We're getting there. I think Europe is a lot more advanced than North America is from an awareness standpoint. But irregardless of the end user demand, I think what's important here is that the industry takes a leadership role. So, and the engine and aircraft manufacturers like ourselves, we need to lead the way to make it easy for our end customers to participate. And I'd even probably go a step ahead and go as far as saying that it will serve as a competitive advantage, and it's going to differentiate a company from another by having programs like this and investing in this. And there's definitely a positive impact when you do anything with sustainability, and especially how it resonates with a younger generation. So, we have to lead the way as OEMs.
So that's interesting. It's not just about customers, it's also about staff, investors, and other stakeholders. Kennedy, 4A is interesting because you've got 4 different strategies. And one of those is carbon offset. And then one of the things about carbon offset is that people still find it slightly controversial. Do you agree?
I think there are people who have questions about it and ask a lot of questions about it, especially in relation to sustainable fuels. But it's we get questions about what's its kind of long-term potential, and we kind of have to remind people that it's never, carbon offsets aren't the long-term solution here. They're really about being a short-term kind of bridging mechanism for action that we can take today. I think we heard from Tim mention that aviation is just 2% of global emissions, and private aviation just 2% of that. So 0.04% of global emissions is coming from private aviation. So if we went 100% carbon neutral, or if we even stopped flying at all, we're not going to solve the global emissions problem. So if we look at things like deforestation or renewable energy, even ground-based transport, cars, those are the larger kind of contributors to global emissions. So carbon offsets are a way for us to kind of look outside of the industry and look at kind of frankly what are the low-hanging fruit for decarbonization. What are the opportunities? It's a lot cheaper to decarbonize a megawatt of electricity than it is to decarbonize a gallon of jet fuel. But we're in the long run going to need to do both because this is a global problem. So let's do kind of those easier ones, those ones that are more affordable to do today, because that's ultimately going to buy us time to do the harder ones in the long run.
And it's a very similar system with 4Air or Pratt and Whitney. I come to you and go, this is how much I'm going to fly this year. And you calculate my carbon offsets and you invest in something that has the effect of taking that carbon out of the atmosphere. Nicole, that's right, isn't it? And you guys see this as the first step. Nicole, would you agree with that?
I definitely agree. It's the first step, but it doesn't stop folks from educating themselves on what else is available. The good news is from a carbon offset service, it's available now. Same way that book and claim is available with SAF. So there are options for them to embark on right now, but this is, for us, the carbon offset service, it's turnkey, it's easy, it's a one-stop shop for our customers. They're already on an engine maintenance plan with us, and it's a no-brainer. So you have to make it easy for them as well.
Leo, you've put a lot of your efforts into SAF, more than offset. Is that fair?
Do you mean me as Bombardier or me as an industry representative?
I see you as indistinguishable.
Okay, well, fair enough. At Bombardier, we're offering SAF for all new customer aircraft deliveries out of Montreal for our Challenger 350, 650, and our global family operators. So we've been doing that for a couple of years now, and it's gaining momentum. And we'll have some announcements on that in the coming months or later this year, I'm sure. We certainly encourage. Let's take a step back. We know that SAF is not going to be available in an abundant supply for another 5 to 7 years. Repeated studies have shown that we just don't have the refining capability that we need right now. So until we have SAF, we have to do book and claim, but book and claim is also tied to SAF availability, and so therefore we have to do offsets, which is the riskier of them all, simply because of green offsetting or greenwashing, as it's called, and you have to, operators would be encouraged, I think, to really look at quality offset carbon credits as opposed to, buying one for $15 a credit as opposed to $1.50 a credit. So I think we have to be very careful with offsetting. But until we have the fuel available, offsetting is going to be the way to go. And I'd say over the next, as I say, 5 to 7 years, we'll start getting more SAF availability. We can see there's production increases at World Energy, at GEVO. We know Neste is starting up in Singapore next year, so we'll have SAF available in Southeast Asia. These are good moves, and we're moving in that direction. There's some exciting government support out of the UK and elsewhere in Europe as well, of course. And so SAF will become increasingly available. It's available now, but it's not in the quantities we want. So I think we have to do offsetting as operators, and I don't see any way around that. And that's a good thing, provided that you buy the right offsets.
So, Andreea, I know BP has done a lot of stuff on offsetting and a lot of other industry, but really everyone on the call says that they want more SAF. Would you agree that
Yes, absolutely. It's a question that's on everybody's minds. SAF is an expensive product to make at the moment, and we're facing this chicken and egg situation where producers want more demand and more demand certainty, and customers want cheaper SAF, which is why we're all involved in these collective action initiatives. We're all involved in some forums, discussions, trying to figure out how can we get government action and buyers and buy SAF. What I'd say is that if somebody's interested in doing something about sustainability today, it's not out of the money if you want to do a 10-15% SAF blend, right? So the cost, if you spread it across all your customers and just even start with lowest SAF blends and even use carbon offsets for the balance of the carbon footprint of that flight, you can achieve a nice profile pretty quickly. Yes, please.
Sorry, just for people on the call, how much more is SAF at the moment than jet A?
So SAF cost of production today is probably 4 to 6 times that of fossil fuel. And a lot of it is driven by feedstocks. Most of the product that is available today is what we call HEFA. It's made of waste oils and like used cooking oil and things like that. And these types of feedstocks are in high demand by ground transportation. They've been using HEFA or HVO technology for a long time, and there's a lot of incentives in ground transportation, especially in the US, which drive demand. So we're facing a bit of a challenge here for aviation because we have to steal some of these feedstocks or lure some of these feedstocks away from ground fuels to aviation. But at BP, we're looking at all the pathways that are needed to deliver the solution. We've invested in which is about to produce their first gallons of renewable fuel from another technology, Fischer-Tropsch. They're using urban waste to produce this fuel. And then there's yet alcohol to jet and pyrolysis and power to liquid. All of these pathways are needed to deliver the huge quantities of SAF that Leo mentioned earlier. And HEFA, which is what we're seeing now, is just a small sliver of this. Yeah, I mean, we're just at the beginning, really, in this journey, and right now it's expensive. But with more demand, we're going to get down the learning curve, and the product is going to become less expensive.
So we've got a question from Lucas Wilcox, who's saying, "At what price point makes SAF more attractive to business aviation than jet A1?"
Yeah, so Nicole mentioned a bit earlier book and claim, and I think it's worth kind of tying these concepts together. We are seeing some areas in the world where the combination of incentives is pretty attractive to for buyers and producers, right? So you can probably purchase SAF on the west coast of the US at a premium of maybe just 2 times that of fossil. So if you blend at 50%, the premium starts to be a little bit more appetizing. Book and claim is a mechanism that allows us to provide physical molecules in a location that has advantages in terms of incentives, and so that airline or customer can claim the carbon footprint reduction other locations by taking advantage of the book and claim system and incentives that are available in some locations.
Okay, that's a great intro to book and claim. Kennedy, we've got a question from an anonymous user. What are your thoughts on the transparency of book and claim?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of development right now from, COSAF has been one of the ones that we've heard about building kind of a framework for what needs to be included in it. But I think there's still some way to go in terms of kind of the systems for it, the clarifications of kind of what the claims being used for. But right now we see a lot of development of kind of these internal book and claim systems. So as long as you can kind of verify both ends of the transaction, when it's going into the fuel tank and then kind of the end of who's claiming it, that's kind of the enabling factor for doing this book and claim today. So we can kind of do that where we've got a partner who's visiting an airport in California, you uplift it into their fuel tank, and then somebody else who's actually paying that differential cost, they're the ones who gets to claim that sustainability certificate. So we'll see, more of these organizations come out with, better standards, I think. RSB has been another one who's working on it, but there's kind of those are the leading edge today.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's so much skepticism about all of this. There's a lot of skepticism from people about carbon offsetting. Book and claim makes a lot of sense because there's no point making SAF in one location, say California, where you've got a tax incentive for then putting it in a lorry and driving it across America and emitting. Okay, we've got more questions coming in. Is the Leo, you mentioned 400 million to 500 million tons by 2015. Someone's asking, is that for blended or neat?
That would be for neat.
And how much is available for uplift now? Does anyone have that? It's about less than 1% of all fuel in Europe is SAF, I think. Is that right?
That's about right. It's about 1.25% actually in Europe right now, and about 1.5% in America. The World Energy has a capability to ramp up quickly upon request, and that's something I just want to touch on, Alasdair. Is operators, folks who are listening to this, operators should pick up the phone and call their FBOs or their fuel providers and ask for the fuel. It's not readily available in most airports, in most GAA airports. However, it can be manufactured with some advance notice. And this is where the fleet operators like VistaJet and NetJets and so on, they have a bit of an advantage. And I guess the Kennedy's operation, God, you look like your dad so much. But anyways, your operation, you can benefit from that. And traditional operators will find it more difficult, but you do have to make the call. It's not as though you can just pull up at an airport and expect to have it available in a reservoir or in a tank. So the biggest thing for operators to do is start making noise and asking for it. And that's what's going to help the whole coalition, all of us, in generating more what I would say substantive interest, as opposed to just saying, gee whiz, I'd like to do it, but I'm scared because it's going to cost me much more money. Well, actually, it's not going to cost as much money as you would like, as you might think. And in many corporations, it's becoming a CSR or sustainability objective. We're seeing more and more operators at Bombardier. When I compare the number of calls we get in our environmental affairs department today compared to 2 years ago, we're getting calls at least every week, 1 or 2 a week, from operators wanting our assistance in directing them to airports and to where to get fuel. And it keeps us hopping, and it's the right thing to do. So I think operators need to be aware that they have a role to play here in terms of generating the interest for SAF. It takes a whole team effort. And I think, as Andreea pointed out, this is quite the long voyage. This is not going to happen overnight. I'd like to say that we probably completed chapter 1, and that's the education factor. And now we need to focus more and more on affordability and availability.
Andreea, 2050 feels like quite a long time away. Is there any chance it could be ready before then?
You were breaking up. I think you said Andreea.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that there'll be enough, the 500 million tons will be there before 2050?
Yeah.
Okay, so the volume is debatable. I think with numbers in our production plans, but we looked at how big the challenge is, and the sector would require about 700 plants across all pathways and more than $500 billion of investment. That's about 23 plants coming online every year from now until 2050. I know there's been a lot of projects that have been announced, but it's not 23 per year. So I don't think we're going to be ahead of the curve, but we definitely want to see more of what we've seen in the last year in terms of excitement and investment and partnerships, airlines committing, customers committing, and all of that. It's definitely going to take an effort from every participant in the industry to get there.
Okay, we've got a great question from Charles Porteous. Nicole, this is for you. Among the several new green initiatives now being offered to business aviation today, which one is perceived by users, operators to have the greatest immediate positive impact on the environment? Is there a clear consensus, or is there something more radical required?
I think we have to look at it from an availability standpoint, and I think this is what everybody on this panel has been talking about right now. From an availability standpoint, what is available right now is the carbon offset service. Is it perceived as the only solution? Absolutely not. But as far as what we can offer to our customers, aside from the book and claim with SAF, it's all piecemeal, right? And I know if we look at other projects that we're working on concurrently, eventually, this will all add up together. But for now, I would encourage to whoever, our operators and our customers that are there, find out, do your homework, find out what's out there. I think it's a question of us also demystifying what this is all about. Whether you're an operator, an FBO, or an OEM, it's important to educate. Leo mentioned it's about education. In real estate, we talk about location. In this case, it's education. That right now there's so many moving pieces to this puzzle and many entrants to the market that it could be somewhat overwhelming. And what's out there for me, what's available now versus how effective is it? Right now, I would say carbon offset is probably quite effective. And not only do you invest in other environmental projects, but you're supporting a local community, you're affecting change in the climate, and also creating jobs in these local communities.
Kennedy, what I quite like about what Fora is doing is you have these stages. So one is offset, one's SAF, and then the third one is investing in new technology.
Correct, yes. And I think I was going to say, well, first to kind of echo, what Nicole's saying, I don't think it's so much skepticism about the initiatives or the options for sustainability themselves, as it is just education about which method is right for somebody. Should they do a program themselves or use somebody else's? Should they get sustainable fuel? Should they wait for it? Should they try to go to airports with it? There's just kind of a lot of questions with people about what the right program and approach is for them. And that's kind of what we're seeing more with this kind of, day-to-day conversation. So we kind of tell people, start by building a carbon footprint. Look at what your estimated hours flown are, what your estimated fuel consumption is, and kind of, use an emissions index to create your baseline fuel emissions, your baseline carbon emissions, and then try to align with the roadmap. Whether that's ICAO's for 50% by 2050, or that's a larger corporation goal or another framework, and start thinking of how you can chip away at it. So, we say today we can address a large part by carbon offsets while laying that foundation for sustainable fuels by looking at, technology. We're looking at some research around, altitude optimizations, cruise speed optimizations, more dynamic flight planning, other kind of mitigation things. So there's so many areas to get involved with, and kind of, start by laying out your own personal kind of, where you are, where you want to be, and start looking at how to chip away at that.
Yeah,
that's great.
If I may, Alasdair, I think Ken has brought up a super important point. We've spoken mostly in this panel about SAF, and there are other fuels as well, and hydrogen's on the horizon. But there are 4 pillars for the business aviation commitment on climate change, which we're all bound to. One is technology, aircraft and engine technology, and there are tremendous strides being made there that everyone in listening to this needs to be aware that the manufacturers, the OEMs, are working very diligently on this. There are a lot of exciting projects. If you look at the electrification wave, and yesterday, Steve Dixon from the FAA told us that they'll be certifying an all-electric aircraft very shortly. You're starting to see the advent of a new technology that is going to grow and become much more common by 2040, 45, 2050 timeframe. The other pillar, which is a bit more yellow, is infrastructure. So in America, the next gen system has really reduced CO2 emissions with more efficient operations, like Ken has just referred to. Unfortunately, we don't have that in Europe just yet, as Athar referred to a couple of hours ago. Operations as well. Here's where operators could improve their CO2 or lower their CO2 by operating their aircraft in a more environmentally friendly fashion. And then there are the market-based measures that we haven't even discussed too much, but there are market-based measures, whether it's voluntary offsetting like we're referring to, or mandatory offsetting like you see with international CORSIA type operations. So there are 4 pillars to the commitment to climate change that our sector has made, and SAF is one of them, and is a very important part of it, and probably the largest part for the next 25 to 30 years, until the new technology aircraft are designed, are approved and regulated, and enter into service in a meaningful fashion. It takes a long time to have a fleet renewal, as we all know. So I just wanted to point it out. It's not just SAF. There are 4 pillars, there are 4 legs to this stool.
No, which is great. And the great thing is I feel that most of the people watching this call, we can just leave the technology to the OEMs. You don't need my help with that. Nicole, it's there if you want it. Nicole, what's the one thing you think that people watching the call should do? I think Kennedy said build a carbon footprint is the first thing you should do. What would you say?
I think it's definitely educate. Do your homework. Understand the options and work with a trusted solution provider. I think that is key as well. When we embarked on our carbon offset service for the business jet customers, we had to complete our due diligence with our third-party provider, South Pole, to ensure that they're investing in key sustainable projects and that they were certified, for one, and that they were following some rigorous sets of rules and requirements. So that's key as well, is make sure that you're working with someone who provides for transparency and accountability, and find out the options. There are quite a few options out there. Do your homework.
Andreea, what's your final piece of advice?
Similar. Do your best to create a strategy, understand how your carbon reduction journey looks like, reach out to the people that you trust to work willing to help people understand how they can achieve their goals, and do something about it.
Okay, I think that's a great way to end. Do something about it. Thank you so much, Kennedy, Andreea, Leo, and Nicole. All of the people on this panel are also very approachable, and they're all there if you need advice, but not Andreea for at least a few days. Let her enjoy her holiday. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Great panel and a very important topic. Thank you so much for joining us for CGAI Global. We are now 12 and a half hours into the conference, and I'm absolutely delighted now to hand over to Richard Evans, a partner at Pillsbury. Richard, despite his accent, is based in California. He's dual qualified English law and California law. And we're just going to go to this straight after. Actually, we're going to go straight to this now. Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Al. Pleasure to join you, and thanks for putting on this great program. It's been fun to listen in and to see some familiar faces, and definitely looking forward to being in Miami at the end of the year. Today's panel is going to be on ultra high net worth individuals and the topical issues facing them. We've got a great panel lined up. We've got 4 aviation bankers who are just appearing on the screen now. And we've got Candice Nakagawa. She's Director and Senior Private Wealth Advisor at Union Bank. She's based in Beverly Hills, so just around the corner from me. Chris Partridge, Director and Head of Private Aviation Finance at DB Wealth Management, based in London, and missing the football for this evening's event, but happy to postpone that. Ford Whyte, Director and Head of Global Aviation Finance and Advisory at Citi Private Bank, based in Boston. And finally, Jim Simpson, Senior Managing Director of Aviation and Marine Finance at First Republic Bank, based in beautiful Mill Valley in Northern California. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, Richard.
So I thought I'd start by asking each of the panel members just to describe their sort of business focus and clientele, and just briefly, because we're lucky to have people who cover the whole of the globe and different focuses. So Candice, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to do that. So, work at MUFG Union Bank. A lot of our clients are ultra high net worth individuals and their families. We help serve their financial needs, and many of our top clients generally like to get some special financing when it comes to their aircrafts and their yachts. And so we're here and ready to do any sort of custom lending for them here at the bank. Nice to meet everybody.
Thanks, Candice. Chris?
Yes, my name is Chris Partridge. I head up the private aviation group for Deutsche Wealth Management. As a global product specialist, myself and my colleague Mark Lambert look after our client base across the world. But I would say that most of our focus is on aviation. We do get involved with much broader conversations with the diverse client base we have, but we're based in London, and we use our relationship management network around the world to help bring in those established and new clients that have aviation interests. And the one point I would highlight is that probably something like 90% of all our work is carried out outside of the US. So it was more relevant to some of the conversations that took place earlier today rather than now.
Thanks, Chris. Ford?
Hi, I'm Ford Von Weise. I'm the Global Head of Aircraft Finance at the Citi Private Bank. We handle ultra-high net worth clients with net worths greater than $100 million in North America and $150 million outside North America. All my group does is just pure business aviation finance. Half of our business is in North America, including Canada, and the other half of the business is outside North America, with a fairly even split between Latin America and Asia, and a little bit in Europe since it's been so quiet recently. There you go.
Thanks, Ford. And Jim?
Richard, thank you. Let me say this. These are my own personal opinions, not those of the company. I'm instructed to say that. So I run
to it, Jim.
the Aviation Marine Group at First Republic Bank. We're headquartered in San Francisco. We have offices across the U.S. on the East Coast and West Coast. And all I do is, it seems to be larger airplanes nowadays and larger yachts. And we do about 80% of our business is aircraft. So we've done a number of G450s, 550, Falcon 7Xs. And yet we'll go down and do a PC-24 or a PC-12 for a client of the bank. We use the aircraft finance product to get new clients for the bank and also take care of the existing clients of the bank. We're a small shop. There's Mike Francis and myself. Mike's in Boston. I'm out here on the West Coast, and we sort of crisscross the U.S. doing it. Everything is domestic as far as our clients, and there seems to be a lot of work out there right now.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. And as Al mentioned, I'm based in LA, originally from London. As a firm, we act for clients all around the world, including Asia through Paul Jebley, the managing director of our Hong Kong office. And we also have a lot of high net worth individuals who come to our practice through sort of the estates, trusts and tax planning team. So I wanted to start with Jim. Just what do you think the market dynamics have been over the last year, and particularly any sort of effect of the pandemic on
Richard, let me say it like this. I mean, there's been quite a party in the private aviation business in the last 18 months. And I wouldn't have said that 15 months ago. I remember coming back from a European trip in March of last year and going, uh-oh, what's going to happen? You know, we're not in the office. We're not here. We're not there. I didn't know what Zoom was on March 1st of 2020. And by April 1st, I was a fairly proficient user of it. We had a fabulous year. And, you know, we saw a couple things. People that we bank and the prospects that we have had great financial years. They love the thought of bonus depreciation, of being able to deduct it all in 1 year. And they went for it. And, you know, there was a lot of aircraft available. Now, this year seems like the financial model is still working. People are having good years, but there's a shortage of the good previously owned airplanes. And so we're seeing clients go ordering new airplanes at this point. So it's still very robust. I guess I've been around a long time. You can see I have very little hair. So I've been through a couple of cycles here on this thing. And I always say that the hangover is commensurate with the size of the party. And we've had a pretty good party since 2009, the recovery type of thing. And things do run in cycles. And so I do sort of wonder. And, you know, we all hear about when individuals get involved with the stock market, that's the time to get out, right? Well, we're seeing a lot of first-time buyers buying G450s and 550s. And I'm very careful with them to really tell them what the costs are, what the expectations are, what's going to happen to the value of the asset, what's all this cost per hour when you're going to fly it. Mm-hmm. And if I hear any hesitation, I'm like, don't do it. Because these are the economics. We've got the data on the airplanes, on the operating costs, on the management companies, and what goes on. So, you know, I'm glad the business is good right now. But again, I'm a little like, is this going to continue?
Interesting. And Ford, have you been scaring clients off buying aircraft as well?
It's funny what Jim just said, because I just got off a conversation late yesterday afternoon with a client who really probably should not be buying an aircraft. And, you know, it's incumbent upon us, they're good clients, is to, you know, convince them actually not to buy the airplane. I did that about a month ago, and somebody called me up from the bank and said, the client just wanted to let you know, thank you. You were right. They're very appreciative of you scaring them away. And Jim's comment, I think, about maybe people who normally wouldn't buy airplanes being interested in buy airplanes is a harbinger of a market peak. That's an interesting thought. I think there's maybe a little truth in that. But I echo Jim's comments in that we have been super busy, lots of conversations with ultra high net worth clients. Although I do see the number of ultra high net worth clients inquiring about buying aircraft or financing them with us has begun to decline a bit. And it seems that a lot of them have either bought an airplane or who are fence sitters or who have decided maybe I shouldn't buy an airplane. We, however, are beginning to see existing clients that have, you know, say 650s or 550s saying, hey, I hear really good things about the G600. I hear great things about the, you know, the Global 7500. Maybe it's time to upgrade since we can't buy a used airplane anyways. So the number of clients buying new airplanes has certainly increased. Whether or not that's going to continue is obviously the big question. Maybe we'll see more of a transition to corporate buyers as they begin to renew some of their fleets and as corporations begin to start flying again. I had a conversation with our own internal flight department yesterday afternoon, and we're still not flying. So probably late July, August, they'll begin, but really it's going to be September. So I think the jury's out until September, October to really understand, you know, what the corporate impact on the overall market conditions might be. But certainly the high net worth client, I think, has had a huge impact over the last 2 years because we've been super busy.
Thanks, Ford. Yeah, I think we'll talk about the difference between the domestic market and the international market when we turn to Chris. But Candice, what have you seen among your clients in terms of appetite for aircraft, for new aircraft owners and otherwise?
Sure. So similar to Jim and Ford, I echo the same comments. It's been very busy in terms of inquiries. We've had, you know, several new clients saying they want to buy a new aircraft, and with no past experience, similar to Ford, we're advising, you know, do you really want to do this? You really have to think about not only the purchase of it, but the ongoing maintenance and that cost of it. So we've had more inquiries than I've seen in the last 12 months over the, you know, 2 decades that I've been in this business. But they are looking, they're itching to get out there. They've got excess cash. They have, you know, pent up demand. They want to buy something neat, you know, sexy. And that typically is a jet or a yacht. But similar to Jim and Ford, I echo the same comments as in terms of just seeing an uptick in the interest in new jets. And of course, those clients who already have them have inquired on, how can we get into a new one? So.
Thanks, Candice. And Chris, I know that 90% of your business is outside of the US. What have the dynamics been sort of like to compare?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's different. I think that's fair to say. We have not seen the same dynamic as the US market has. There has certainly been increased interest. The issue of cross-border travel has been a much, much bigger problem, obviously, across Europe, Middle East, and Asia than it has in the US. And that in itself has either stopped or delayed people, if they've got their own aircraft, maybe upgraded. So we've seen quite a bit of people looking at pre-owned inventory, refinancing, or even re-leveraging aircraft if they've got no debt on it. And in the current environment, certainly across Asia, it is really difficult trying to get cross-border. I mean, earlier this afternoon, we heard people talking about, for example, Singapore. You've got a 21-day quarantine period to go into Singapore. So that has been something that has dramatically impacted people's propositions. And a lot of ultra-high net worth clients are very insular. They're really nervous about the implications there are about the pandemic, their ability to travel for both themselves, their family, their friends, their work colleagues. And as a consequence of which, I'm not seeing quite the same dynamic as the US marketplaces. People are still doing deals, for sure. People are still talking about deals. The one problem we're seeing, and again, I think this has been echoed earlier today, is deals are taking forever. Anything that's cross-border causes significant delays. And so for us in Europe, dealing with clients in the Middle East, Africa, or even in the US, wherever there's a cross-border component, we are finding that things, instead of taking a normal, let's say, 6-10 weeks to turn around something, we're talking now as much as 6 months, because you can't get PPI slots, you can't get engineers, you can't get pilots, you can't get aircraft moved. So it's a very, very different dynamic, ex-US or ex-North America and interior North America.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of your own market dynamics in terms of interest rates and winning the business, I know Ford and Jim, you describe yourselves as friendly rivals and compete a lot on the US market. Jim, have you sort of won or lost deals based on interest rate?
Yeah, I mean, interest rate isn't the only thing, but it's certainly a big portion of it. But it's terms and conditions and covenants or whatever it may be, and then the economics and the amortizations on the financing. We only do debt deals. We do structured debt. We don't do any true leases. We don't take ownership of it. And I always love competing against a true lease opportunity, because we can beat them up pretty bad, because the banks took such a beating back in 08 and 09 on values of airplanes and what they had in the portfolio and the write-downs they had to take. And again, in the ultra high net worth space, the individuals want the flexibility to be able to get in or out of the airplane. They don't want to get tied into an early buyout date in the future. They like to really wheel and deal as they see fit. So interest rate's part of it, but not all of it.
And Ford?
Well, the last time I was out in Jim's neck of the woods, I walked out of a client's office and Jim was sitting there in the waiting room waiting to go in and talk to him. And by the way, that happened twice, just so you know. To your point, Richard, that evening, my dinner plans were canceled. I did ring Jim up and we had dinner together. So we are friendly competitors, but we do compete. And we're not competing just on price. We're competing on structure. We're competing on overall relationship too, because, we don't make a lot of money in aircraft finance. Who's kidding who? With the spreads as thin as they are and the competition in North America as brutal as it is, frankly, we use it as a client acquisition tool. And we can use the revenue from other non-credit products, investments, and whatnot to, determine and help price the transaction such that what might seem to be a ridiculously low price deal still is accretive to the overall relationship, and or the overall relationship is so strong that even below returns on the aircraft deal, which are very low, still doesn't have an impact on the overall relationship. This is not like the equipment finance lenders, which a deal is a deal, it's a transaction business. This is a relationship business. Part of that relationship is also telling a client you can't afford an airplane, or you might want to think about a smaller airplane, or have you might want to think about a fractional program. Those are the types of, we're just, half of my time is talking to clients about aviation needs, and then the other half about finance. And frankly, the finance part's the easy stuff. The relationship and the aircraft conversations are more dynamic, interesting, and more, frankly, complicated pieces of the overall, puzzle we're trying to put together here.
Right. And Candice, I'm guessing that your situation is very similar, where the relationship is always top of mind, particularly sort of with your private wealth focus, and not necessarily always with the aviation hat on.
Correct. Yeah, we don't do just transaction-based lending. Everything is relationship, and as Ford had indicated, it's the spreads are so thin. The transactions, basically are not that fruitful for the bank to do, but we do use it as an acquisition tool to gather additional relationship for our clients. So, one of the other things that we do look for is, if somebody's brand new, that is a little bit tougher. We'd like a client to have some relationship with us, and then have that expansion opportunity with them, utilizing the aircraft lending as a tool to do that.
Right. And Chris, you've seen previous cycles, and currently we're looking at sort of robust residuals in the short term, at least, for aircraft with such high demand. How much is the sort of wider economic setting impacting your decision making?
It's a strange one. You frame the question like that, and yet billionaires in the world are only getting more wealthy in this current environment. So actually, one of the issues that we face, and I've been talking to some RMs in Germany today, is the biggest competitor I have is cash, because a lot of clients are so cash rich that they can easily pay for aircraft with cash. And going on to Candice's point, likewise, the broader relationship, because certainly within Germany, Deutsche being effectively the house bank for a lot of the major ultra high net worth there, it does help us, and we play across the broader relationship. But it's not, cash is also relevant in other parts of the world as well, where the credit risk portfolio of our client mix is probably a bit racier, shall we say, than the likes of Ford and Jim's and Candice's. So we're looking at the credit risk analysis as well. Yes, people have cash. Maybe they have problems with moving it around because of cash flow restrictions outside of countries, China, India, and the likes. Registration of personal guarantees is equally an issue. So we have to look at a much broader range of risk profiling and also cash flows that these individuals or families have to better analyze the sort of returns we get. I mean, the one thing I would say is, because it is of that very nature, it is more risky than doing it to a billionaire in the US, in California. Our returns and our spreads are commensurately a little bit higher.
Okay. And I think you said you'd seen even some customers pulling money out of existing loans and sort of investing it elsewhere.
Absolutely. Clients, if they own these aircraft and they can raise liquidity out of them, people have been doing that. I mean, it is quite common for people who have large aircraft where they can take out 30, 40 million to take that out and invest it, because the returns they're going to get on that type of investment would be, in the current market environment, which seems to be a never-ending upcycle, is one where they're going to get a better return to cover the cost of the money that they're borrowing for the aircraft.
And Jim, you had a comment.
Yeah, Chris, you raised some good points. I mean, so I think I run the only group within First Republic that we finance assets that go down in value, right? I mean, and they do, and we've got the data, and everyone, it's proven in the markets. The other thing is, while people say, I'm going to charter this or charter that and get some cash flow, these assets consume cash. So when we deal with the ultra high net worths and they say, well, I'll just pay cash for it, I'm like, I'll tell you what, why don't you save your cash and invest in something that's going to go up in value? And you finance and use some leverage and stuff that's going to go down in value, and we'll track the amortization and make sure you don't get in trouble with it.
Now, Richard, there's one thing we've seen over the past 2 weeks is the conversation about interest rates. A lot of clients who've closed on floating rate facilities are now talking about putting swaps in place to somehow limit their interest rate exposure, either through a cap collar or just a straight out swap of the rate to a fixed rate. And it's interesting to see the clients' different perspectives, because the ultra high net worth client is so much more reactive to what's going on immediately in the market, to what he reads in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or on Bloomberg, that those conversations, which you really never had before occasionally, we're having all the time now. And it seems that I'm spending as much time on the phone or on Zoom talking to clients with our capital markets folks as I did last year together just in the past week. So that seems to be a real interesting trend. The ultra high net worth community, particularly the older gentlemen, and I think, between Chris, myself, and Jim, we can remember the 1970s. We can remember the early 80s when, there was a 22% interest rate when I went to college and you took out a student loan. It was crazy. So, and that scares them. They are absolutely afraid of going back to a high interest rate environment, and they are reaching out and trying to, limit that risk as much as they can. Whether or not they're right or wrong, who knows? But given what the Fed said yesterday, there's probably a little truth in it at least. So that seems to be an interesting trend, and they're trying to tidy up their balance sheets. Remember, we're not in the business of lending money to people who need cash to buy an airplane. All of us, right now I'm looking at, Chris, Candice, Jim, and myself, we're in the business of optimizing our clients' balance sheets. And they are in the process of tightening them up, buttoning them down for what they fear could be a rocky road ahead. And part of that is putting, a secured term fixed rate facility on their aircraft when they might have bought a cash. So I echo Jim's comment in that we are seeing a lot of folks who paid cash beginning to take some money out. And they're saying, hey, in an rising interest rate environment, I like to have a little powder, to be a dry powder on the side, to be able to execute on opportunities that we see. And a great way to do that is to borrow against the aircraft. So, Jim, you're spot on.
Hey, Ford, have you gotten into the collateralized swap versus the uncollateralized swap conversations?
Yeah, and there's some regulatory stuff, and I'm not allowed to talk about it because I don't have a license to talk about it. So I'm not going to talk about it.
So what we can talk about is something that we've touched on already, which is the fact that we've been communicating with our clients remotely for year and a half now. Our clients have been stuck at home more than ever, with the exception, particularly for our type of clients who use their private jets to be able to get around where others can't. Candice, in relation to your sort of interaction with your customers and clients, what sort of trends have you seen in terms of their habits and investment priorities?
So I think although, the pandemic, affected all of us, my high net worth clients really had the flexibility utilizing their private jets to go, to their vacation homes around the country. Several of them didn't even stay in California. They went to other states where they thought, the pandemic was, the infection rates were lower. Because they certainly had older family members that they wanted to reduce that particular risk. So we did see a lot of them, parts like Colorado, Utah, not here in California. They just ended up staying where they wanted to be and took advantage of having less people in that area, using their aircraft more often, and at least doing things that got them out of the house.
We've heard from some family office colleagues and people who advise family officers that, you know, their clients have been spending more time at home with their families and the younger generation, and have focused as a result on issues that concern the younger generation and you know, local charities and things like that. Have you seen that at all, Candice?
I have, actually. There has been an increase, especially with our ultra high net worth clients that are being more charitable. We've seen an uptick in creating individual, like, operating foundations for families. They finally pulled the trigger. So that has been nice to see, that they become more charitably inclined. They've been previously inclined. It's just, I think, more so now since the pandemic. I'm sure Ford, you know, and everybody else on this call has seen the same thing.
Chris, have you seen sort of succession planning and changes in outlook?
Absolutely. I think sort of philanthropy has come a lot more to the fore. Certainly from what we've seen Europe, Middle East, and Asia as well, where people haven't been able to do the trans-border travel. They're spending a lot more time with family rather than disappearing off on 3-4 week long business trips. And there has been much more focus about what they're doing, how they're doing it, how they can support their family, and what their family's broader interests are. The whole green initiative is certainly something. The whole ESG subject matter is something that's completely come to the fore in the last. It has been around for years, obviously, but it's come to the fore in the last 12, 18 months. And certainly philanthropy, looking at and around global issues, is certainly something that I have seen people focusing upon.
And Jim?
Well, you know, I'll echo what everyone's been saying. You know, the philanthropic efforts are becoming bigger. I mean, when we get into the acquisition of an aircraft of over about 20 million, and especially it's a first-time purchase, I spend more time in people's heads about how much should they be donating to charity or giving in a philanthropic foundation than they should be spending on the airplane. It's not about the airplane. It's about their financial life and how comfortable are they. Mm-hmm. And what do other people do? They want some benchmarks. And we've got a private wealth management group in the bank who's very good with having a lot of data, but it's certainly a concern. You know, people feel a little guilty at times about, I have all this money, I'm going to spend it, I'm going to buy a big airplane, you know. And we've also had people decide not to buy a big airplane because of just the footprint and what it looked like at the airport. I was out with a client on a G650, and she said, God, this thing is so big. Why don't we look at a Challenger 650? I said, it's a whole different animal. I get it. But it's not this. I don't want to be saying getting out of a big G650. So it's a very interesting world to get into with these things. Yeah, and Ford, anything to add on sort of that subject, or you know, Jim mentioned and Chris mentioned sort of green concerns and ESG. Is there anything that you've seen in terms of trends regarding clients looking to carbon offset?
Well, it seems that 3 of the 5 people are out on the West Coast, which is where all of our clients started asking about it. And it seems that our clients now in the New York, Boston area are certainly asking about it. Yeah, they're very concerned. They're concerned about the image. They're actually, and many of them are actually concerned about the impact. It does sound like you're speaking out both sides of your mouth, but a lot of them are talking about, you know, book and trade or offsets. They're trying to really understand what they're all about. I know all of the big banks are talking, have put together groups to advise clients on this. It's still a very nascent industry. I know that we have a new chief sustainability officer who's in the process of working on that with clients. I had a conversation with our own director of aviation about city's own carbon offset program and wanting to go further. So this is just the beginning of a conversation across. Eventually, people down south and people in Texas and outside of the U.S., Europe's always talked about it much sooner than America. They're much further ahead than the U.S. is. But I think Southern folks will begin to talk about it as well, because it's just inevitable. There's no question. The industry has a huge exposure, and whether it's, you know, perceived real or it's just perception, and perception is reality to a certain extent. You know, we need to do as much as we can so that we don't become the big fat cat target. You know, when the climate crisis becomes more real and dramatically more impactful, which it certainly will.
And Candice, have you sort of seen people looking at high net worth people as easy targets and having to sort of manage that reputational risk and environmental concern for them?
I would say what I've seen more of, unrelated to the aircraft lending, has been, their concern for, sustainability in the way that they invest in their portfolios, right? So that's been more of a discussion, much less than, the aircraft piece of it. I think the clients who are using aircrafts, at least for my space, they haven't really expressed too much concern as far as, what will it look like from the exterior.
And Chris, what's DB's outlook?
The outlook is obviously being Eurocentric, is very, very focused around green issues, ESG issues. And so there is a significant focus, equally as Candice has mentioned, around the whole investment structure of our clients. Most banks now are all having to do analysis of their portfolios, of their broader lending portfolios, and getting them rated to an ESG standard. And that's certainly something that we're hearing more and more of. We've even done green aviation bonds, which sounds like a bit of a dichotomy, really, but they are happening. But it is one of those things that I think, as Ford was saying, is it reality or is it perception? Aviation only creates something like 2.5% of all carbon emissions. Transportation itself, ground transportation, creates something like 50, 60, 70% of all emissions. And yet, yes, we're moving to electric vehicles, but the speed of movement is very, very low. So from a corporate perspective, there is a very, very broad approach to whole of the ESG marketplace. We're trying to educate clients. We're trying to educate ourselves. As you say, it's a nascent market. It's moving quite quickly. But it is something that is focusing everybody's attention at the moment. And constructively, it's moving in the right direction.
Very good. We're coming towards the end of the session, but I did want to sort of think about anything that's a particular concern for your clients right now. We've been listening into some of the previous sessions, and I'd certainly direct people to look at the green energy sessions that went before us. And also bonus depreciation was talked about, and there's potential, changes in laws afoot with the new administration. Is there anything in particular that you're looking at in the US, Candice, for the rest of the year that is a potential concern for your customers?
Yeah, I'd say, some of the main topics have been, certainly inflation, rising interest rates, and then of course the big one is that the Biden, administration's, potential changes. So those would be kind of the top three that my clients are concerned about and that we talk to, on an ongoing basis.
And Jim, at the moment, bonus depreciation is going to continue to be available through next year, and then we'll be ratcheting down. Are there any other things that you're looking at?
Well, we have a lot of conversations with clients about don't let bonus depreciation swing your decision on buying an airplane or not. Buy it without even bonus depreciation being available. Because if you're going to do it for a tax reason, it's the wrong reason to buy the airplane. You're going to wind up resenting it, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. The other thing we hear from the tax advisors is taking bonus depreciation for the ultra high net worth individuals. There is some tax risk there that opens up tax returns. And some people will say, fine, let them audit. Others will say, we'll only audit a certain section. Others say, I'll hire a significant law firm to defend me. And others say, I don't want to do it. I'm going to go straight line. So it's an interesting conversation. But again, people, in my opinion, shouldn't make decisions based on the acquisition of an aircraft if there's bonus depreciation or not bonus depreciation. It should be if it's a sound economic decision and financial decision for their lifestyle.
Right. And Ford?
Yeah, I've always said to clients, bonus depreciation taxes, is not a reason to buy an airplane, full stop, because you're just borrowing the government's money for a period of time. That's it. Particularly with the Trump, Tax Reform Act, eliminating the 1031 exchanges, what the strategy for a lot of clients was to always exchange into a bigger airplane until you die and you get a step up in basis and boom, you didn't have to pay that gain.
Right.
Well, that just went away, guys. So, buy an airplane because you need it and you can afford it. And it's not going to really keep you up at night when you write the check to use it. So that's what I try and tell clients. And by the way, your ability to actually use those deductions is maybe limited more than you might think it is. And also, it's interesting to hear some of the accountants that work for these clients who really don't know business aviation. And very often their bubble is burst when we have them talk to a specialist in the space that fills them in on what's going on. It comes down to, we have clients that use these airplanes not because they're boy toys, and that's the very European perception of this, but because they have utility and they allow our clients to get more places faster than anything else, particularly during the pandemic. And that was the beauty of business aviation, particularly for the high net worth crowd, because they were still flying. They could get where they wanted to go, and forget the taxes. It just doesn't make sense. Do you need to get there? If so, how much is it going to cost?
So, we view it as their time machines and their lifestyle assets. And they really are. It's a lifestyle if you're going to own these types of assets.
Well, remember, Jim, there are only, two things in the world that create time. What are they?
You got it.
Botox and a business jet.
Oh, that's a good one, Ford.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Chris, I was going to ask you about your European boy toys and all the rest of it, but obviously I want your views on Botox first.
Well, I think going back to the seriousness of the broader situation, as Candice was saying, economics is very important. Clients are really concerned, particularly clients who have a truly international footprint, because with political sensitivities being what they are, with the recent Putin-Biden, plus the NATO, plus the EU, plus the G7 summits that have all gone on, there's a little bit of tension in the global economics at the moment, and really people want a comfortable feeling that if they're going to step into this marketplace, if they don't already have an aircraft, that actually what they're buying is buying them the lifestyle and productivity capabilities that we've been talking about. A vast majority of people are not doing this as they might do in the US for just A, B, C, D round production facilities. They're much more homes in Paris, homes in LA, or in Fiji or somewhere like that. It's much more a lifestyle thing. So it's a slightly different dynamic, but it's certainly something that people are pausing before making that decision and signing on the dotted line and saying, yes, I want to do the aircraft now. I think people are having a bit of a sense check that they can really afford it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Chris. Well, if you had a time machine, we'd go back and continue discussing for another 10, 15 minutes, but I think we're coming to the end of the session. So I just wanted to thank you all for participating, Candice, Chris, Ford, and Jim. It's been a pleasure. I'll hand back over to Al and also thank him for setting up this program again.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Thanks, everyone.
Jim, Ford.
Welcome back to CJI Global 2021. Our next speaker needs no introduction purely, well, for many reasons. One, because he needs no introduction, and two, if he did, he just had one from Richard. That was a great panel, and I'm delighted to hand back to Ford von Whyte from Citi Private Bank, who's going to take us through the last session. We started in Australia, we're ending in the US, and I'm delighted to hand over to Ford. Ford, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Al. We started off in the furthest place from Boston, Massachusetts that you can fly commercially. So I think that's appropriate. We're ending there. So we've got two esteemed gentlemen joining me today, two who to a certain extent don't need an introduction, but I'm going to give them one anyways for some of you who haven't heard of them. Andy Priester is the president and CEO of Priester Aviation. He is the third generation to run Chicago's oldest, and I can, with somewhat confidence say probably most reputable and well-known charter operator. And Andy was the first person who ever granted me a meeting. When I first got into this industry, he and his father actually together many, many years ago. So again, Andy, thank you very much. Also joining us is David Best, our favorite Scotsman in the U.S., who lives in Florida because he doesn't like cold weather. Gee, I wonder where that happened. But, David is actually the senior vice president and general manager of U.S. operations for Jet Aviation. Of virtually everybody's heard of that large international aircraft management firm and FBO facilities. That's part of General Dynamics, a sister company of Gulfstream. And also, I must say that David is on the board of the National Air Transportation Association, NATA, and is also on the NBAA Leadership Council. So in some respects, David ought to be running this show as opposed to me because he is the gentleman with the fancier CV. But that's not really the case. We're here to talk about, with these two, the primary focus will be North American operations for charter, really, or charter management companies. And what I thought I'd start with is just, how has business been since COVID seems to be in North America, seems to be, it has actually, abated quite notably. And most states are lifting restrictions. I know Vermont yesterday announced all restrictions gone 100%, 80% of the population's vaccinated, the highest. United States, Massachusetts and Connecticut are second and third. And so I'm wondering, has that made a real impact on your business, Andy?
Yeah, Ford, thanks for letting me join you guys again. It's always a pleasure to get together with you and David. I know we've done it a few times, and I think it's pretty safe to say that, the recovery in aviation for all of us here in the United States, all the operators, is probably staying true to prediction. Obviously COVID wound up being a tough time, and I think everybody kind of predicted that the new folks that came in with COVID that started flying were going to continue to fly. And once things opened up, we were going to have not only the old set of customers staying with us, but we have an entire new set of customers from a charter side of things and also a management side of things. And it would just wind up accelerating. And, for us, every time you think it might slow down a little bit, it doesn't. It winds up accelerating. So for us right now, post-pandemic, very recent post-pandemic, it seems every week continues to get stronger.
I'm glad to hear it. David, how about yourself? How's life at Jet changed since things are getting a little more open?
No, the world is getting more open. I'm here today in Bozeman, Montana, at our FBO out here, hence the moose behind me. So,
is it true, by the way, that you actually had an inventory list of moose head you had to deal with in terms of the renovation?
There was a specific item on the renovation which talked about rehanging the moose head in the lobby. So I'm looking at it right now.
And does that help business, by the way?
It absolutely does. Yeah, it's our lucky charm.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry, go ahead.
I think reflecting what Andy said as well, there has been a real we're seeing a strong growth. You see it in all the industry stats about what's coming back and how it's growing forward, especially in the resort locations. I'm here today in Bozeman. You look at Bozeman, Palm Beach. I think Palm Beach has been registered as the busiest location in the US for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and it just hasn't stopped activity in these places. I think what you don't see from the numbers, and I don't know if Andy's seeing the same phenomenon, is that whilst the growth has been steady at a macro level, the spikes and peaks have been incredible. You go into these periods round about, especially holidays. We went into spring break, Memorial Day, even Christmas, Thanksgiving. The flying population just went absolutely crazy and really went out there. And we're seeing this shift in our business for resort locations, big holiday peaks, but also Also, weekends been much busier than during the week in a lot of places, whereby traditionally our business was sort of commercial business focused, and you would see the whole thing being building up to crescendo on a Wednesday and then easing off towards the weekend. That whole thing shifted by 3 or 4 days, and what we're now seeing is that we build up to big weekends and then it eases during the week.
So, Andy, David just mentioned how his business seems to have changed over the past year, probably due to COVID. Are you seeing similar changes, and how has business changed since the beginning of COVID to where we are today for you?
Yeah, so and I want to echo a couple of things that David said. Is he's 1,000% right. You know, the traditional peaks and valleys on a weekly cycle, those seems to have shifted. But the other thing that we've noticed, and we're experiencing it right now, and obviously a few weeks does not a trend make, but this is supposed to be our slow season in the U.S. The summer traditionally winds up slowing down. I can tell you the summer, at least right now, continues to accelerate, and I equate that with, again, the world opening up and the U.S. opening up and things along those lines. So again, we're really bullish about what the future winds up being. We believe that our summer is going to continue to kind of increase. Again, synergize with David in terms of the resort locations seem to be of primary importance. And the phone calls that we're getting, you know, our traditional retail clients, as well as the wholesale clients, the volume of calls, you know, simply indicates that things continue to get better. And I think your question was, how does that compare with the beginning of COVID, or how do we really handicap that kind of going forward? We don't think it's slowing down.
Wow, that's great. Glad to hear it. David, Andy just, alluded to, his business changing a bit, but another business that we've seen change a lot is your industry and Andy's industry. We've seen a whole bunch of acquisitions, mergers or quasi-mergers in the space, big investments by private equity firms in the past few weeks alone, not to mention previously announced transactions. Is it changing your operating and competitive landscape? And if so, what do you think those short and long-term implications are? And I'm going to ask this question of Andy as well.
Yeah. We have seen a lot of activity, particularly in the FBO space with two of the two largest industry players, both transacting recently, and one coming off being a publicly traded company into being held by private equity. So it is a difference in the industry. What you see in the immediate term is not a huge change. These businesses are asset based, and they operate on airfields and handle their customer base. I think the longer term implications are probably a bit more interesting. Effectively, if you look at these asset based businesses, there's obviously now an expectation change in the price dynamic because they've been selling for some pretty rich multiples. And if you go back maybe 10 years, I remember when FBO started trading, it was always 8 to 10 times, and then it was 10 to 11 times, and people were going, "Oh, it's crazy, it'll never last." And then the ones you're seeing at the moment are 13 to 16. So I don't know what happens in the long term if that continues progressing, but effectively it's still money in, money out. It's still got to get paid back at some point, and people have got to make money. So I don't know if there's implications for either the investment base as to what these owners do about investing in their ongoing assets, or pricing for the customers in the long run. I think there's probably maybe some interesting implications longer term about how the industry sort of funds and finances itself if it trades at that level.
Well, and just for clarification, that's what do you say? 10 times? That's a multiple of EBITDA, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So, Andy, how have these? It's been going on for a few years. How's it changed in what you see your business being in the industry, sort of from your perspective?
Sure. It is kind of interesting. So, we've seen in our industry, I think over the last 20, 25 years, different cycles of what I will call charter crazy. And right now the industry is charter crazy. There is more demand than there is lift, just generally speaking. And that's really driving a couple of things. Number one, for the big brokers, and again, everybody on the webinar here probably sees it, the big brokers, their play, at least Andy's impression of their play, is the acquisition of different players that wind up being strong in the charter market. Maybe they own their own airplanes. Maybe they have a lot of airplanes that are very focused on charter, because those big brokers, those companies wind up needing, the charter lift. It winds up being interesting. What that does for us, it both helps and hurts us, because we wind up, of course, having our own fleet that we wind up making available for charter. But for us personally, we're still procuring and subbing off a lot of trips. So finding available airplanes out there with the high charter demand is challenging. It's not just challenging for us, it's challenging for everybody kind of across the country. As some of the big players consolidate those things, you really change your procurement channels. So we're getting calls from different places that we did before. We've always had good relationships, but some of those are being kind of refined, and we're doing more business with certain people. But the other thing it's doing that I think is interesting, that is more challenging to deal with, is in this charter crazy environment, there are a lot of people that are starting 135s, that are seeing the charter market as a market that they can wind up really taking advantage of, from a long-term perspective. And as those smaller 135s start and they get 1 airplane, 2 airplanes, 3 airplanes, they have a different way that they wind up competing for business. Frequently it winds up being on price. They have a different structural model, things along those lines. So the competitive environment in the charter and the management world is changing, I think, really pretty rapidly, and it's making competition very, very difficult. What does that mean for the future? I'm not smart enough to figure that out, right? I mean, there's a lot. As the one phrase I love hearing is, when the elephants are fighting, us monkeys hide in the trees. So right now, I feel like I'm a monkey just watching what the elephants are doing, and we're doing great. We're really happy with where we are, but I'm myself kind of interested to see, both sides of the spectrums. You have the big guys continue to gobble up other people, and you have the little guys all starting, and trying to make a go of it. And we are competing in that ecosystem in a way that's been different than it ever has been before.
So Andy is a well-known charter company that is, afraid of the elephants. Why haven't you sold? I'm sure people knocking on your door all the time.
Well, yeah, we've Priester Aviation, we've really focused quite a bit on management in the past. So in all honesty, when you wind up looking at us, we have a good charter book and we have a good charter fleet, but we have a better managed fleet. So if I am one of the big guys that is looking for a big charter fleet to help supplement their procurement methods, we're probably not the ideal target for those types of people. So, we'll see where life leads us kind of going forward. And we have our own growth plans that we're executing on. So, and I do think, I believe strongly that there's going to continue to be acquisition throughout the marketplace and continue to be kind of organic growth with some of the new 135s.
He sounds like an aircraft, OEM that's building a new airplane that doesn't want to say that they're building a new airplane. So, okay, we get it, Andy. Thanks. So, David, Andy sort of alluded to, changes going on in the industry and fast, how it's changing so quickly. And specifically, he sort of mentioned he's more of a managed fleet-focused operator. Is it fair to say that the industry is bifurcating itself into the management company-focused outfits like Priester Aviation and the charter-focused outfits that we're seeing being put together with some of these roll-ups? Do you see that sort of bifurcation happening, or is it pretty much it's the same old game with just a slightly different flavor of the day?
I think first you've been trying to use bifurcation for a long time, haven't you?
I've been dying to use it. Absolutely.
Finally got into sentence. I think I think it's an interesting view, because you either if you look at what's happened in the market, effectively the borders get closed, so the big international charters weren't leaving the country for quite a long time, and then we had all these new entrants into the market from a customer perspective. And essentially, kind of overnight, the market became domestic, mid, super mid, as everyone moved about the US as opposed to moved about the world, and that then drew a lot of people into that sort of floating fleet charter model. I suppose you can, going back to what Andy said, you get sort of two sets of companies. You get an aircraft management company that will charter on your behalf for convenience if you want, or you get a charter company that will take your aircraft in and you can use it occasionally while they sweat the asset for you. So I think the market is doing that in some way, whereby there is a big growth in these kind of floating fleet models versus charter management companies, and we're seeing that, and it's been accelerated because of the sort of dynamic of everyone moving about domestically at the moment. Now, how that changes their model when the international borders open up will be interesting as well. Does that then just layer on the next level of people and keep everyone in the market?
So, Andy, David sort of mentioned, how things have changed. There's more of a domestic demand. Where is the charter demand coming from these days, for you at least? And has it changed, against sort of the prior years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, I was just talking to our sales team yesterday about this. And for us, traditionally, we were approximately 70% business, 30% pleasure. Since the beginning of COVID, and this is changing back, by the way, but it's still holding much more true than it had in the past. Since the beginning of COVID, we are much more, well, during COVID, it had completely reversed. It was 80% pleasure, 20% business, or maybe I should say personal, and 20% business. And now we're about 50-50, which is unusual for us. We still have a lot of the personal travelers that continue to travel, and we believe that's the leftover people from, leftover again is the wrong word, but that's the new entrants that came in as a result of the pandemic. And now we see that business coming back, just starting to come back. And also, like David said, we have not seen, at least to a significant magnitude, the international flying come back. And that's why we're looking at the summer already accelerating. We're looking at the fall. We're a bit concerned about the fall just with the availability of airplanes that wind up being out there, because we're seeing such strong demand right now. We think that the fall could kind of be a challenging environment just to procure airplanes for the charter customers that we have. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, to a certain extent. David, we've got some big, I would say, branded charter out there firms, as well as large charter brokerage firms that have branded themselves in the market pretty well. And they seem to be short of aircraft and sucking up all the demand they can get. Has it changed where you guys are providing charter to and to whom you're providing charter, or is it sort of the same demand components you've seen over the years?
The demand, I mean, you both Andy and you have said it, the big challenge just now is getting lift. And of course, everybody's out in the market demanding lift. And you are, we both provide and demand lift. We have our fleet of aircraft that fulfill certain missions, and then we've a need for other aircraft which we go and seek lift for. On that basis, you are in a marketplace where you're looking for lift, and the big branded charter operators are also in that place. Where we're being asked for lift from, it hasn't changed significantly. We're still working with a lot of the big branded people whenever they come and look into our fleet for where they can get lift from. So that part of it hasn't moved dramatically. But I think going back to what something that Andy talked about was how it's evolved. We are now seeing the start of the more traditional customers coming back into the market, the corporations and people like that are coming in and looking for product and starting to drive that part up again. Whereas throughout the sort of start of COVID and the beginning of it, it was people, personal flying, moving to houses, moving to resort locations, and yeah, that stuff's still there. But we are seeing the corporations coming back.
So, Andy, both you and David have talked about this huge increase in demand for charter and just trying to find the lift. Normal economics would say that, when you're seeing such a huge increase in demand, prices would increase as well, because demand's, to a certain extent, fairly well defined here. But yet charter rates really haven't increased, if I'm not mistaken. I don't understand this. So can you sort of explain what's going on?
No. Can't explain it. So Ford, you're 100% right. And there was somebody that I'm on a group on social media with that had made the comment, and I'm going to have the context a little bit wrong, but they actually found a rate sheet from, I want to say, early 90s, where a G4 was on the charter market was $4,800 an hour. I don't remember the exact rates. And then they have their current rate, and it winds up being $4,900 an hour or something. So for whatever reason, this I would argue that our market segment needs therapy, because as a group and from a competitive situation, the market rates have not increased in a way that would be normal in a business environment. And I think some of that reason, in all honesty, Ford, is something that I had alluded to before. So, and I just had an answer pop up on my cell phone, actually, while we were talking. There are 1,100 pending new charter certificates, 1,100 pending at the FAA right now. So as these new entrants come in, they have to decide how they're going to wind up competing. And again, very rarely do new entrants come in and they show up with massive infrastructure and things along those lines. So as long as they're, and we all work in a business that there's an incredible amount of passion, and everybody thinks that there can be a new mousetrap, and sometimes it's right, but a lot of times the competitive advantage that they're trying to do is price, and that does affect kind of the market, and it makes people question, makes owners question, and charter buyers question. Well, David's G4 is $4,700 and yours is $4,900. Meanwhile, they gave their server a $300 tip, but they question, and I don't know if everybody really understands what goes into the value of what certain providers do for their clients, and maybe what value others are working for that they don't quite have yet. So it's a highly competitive environment. You have different size companies with different infrastructures, with different investment levels, that are all fishing in the same pond and competing for the same company, that are saying essentially the exact same thing. We have the safest pilots. We have 24/7 operations. Everybody winds up being great. We take care of your airplane to the best. We're wonderful at service. We all sell the exact same thing, and we sound the same way. And people are willing to do it at different price points, and sometimes that gets confusing, and that makes it challenging to really raise rates out there.
So, David, I've got another question to ask you, but before I do you have any sort of follow-on comments to what Andy was just talking about?
Just when you started that conversation, I thought this is probably something that should be some sort of business skill case study. The fact that you can take rising demand in a flat market and prices stay depressed. So it's an incredibly interesting phenomenon, and it's also, I think, driven a little bit by two things. Number one is the number of there's an awful lot of shoppers out there just now. There's a huge amount of quote to fly ratio, where people are, oh, why don't we take a private jet? What do you mean it cost me that? It's like, that's ridiculous. And so there's people quoting all the time. So the activity is very, very strong. And then, of course, the marketplaces that feed the charter demand, people are phoning up multiple brokers. So you're getting the same call for the same trip all the time. And it's throwing that demand out. And it basically accelerates up the noise in the market where people are bidding on trips.
Why does this remind me of the 1970s and stagflation? It seems we're entering business. If you're right, we're entering business aviation's area of stagflation in the charter market. But really, my question to you, David, and thank you for adding on, because I thought your comments were interesting, is let's switch a little bit. And what is the strategy, if there is a strategy, behind what we're seeing is these, you alluded to earlier, the sky high prices of some of these roll-ups in the space, both on the FBO side as well as, we saw, Atlantic, as well as the charter operator side. Is there a sort of a grand scheme here of global domination, or how can you pay those sky high prices and at the end of the day still say you have a great investment? Is there logic?
I'm not sure I'll be allowed to comment on that in a public forum. It is interesting to see what effectively you go back to, for a lot of people, what's the cost of money, and where do you put your money and what you do with it. If you take a lot of these assets, through cycle, they still grow. They're in, if it's an FBO space, they're in capacity constrained airports with leases that are fairly predictable, so they can look at cash flows, and also it's a cash positive business. You can throw off cash by effectively in FBOs. You can sell fuel multiple times before you have to pay for it. So there is opportunity there. Whenever you start getting into some of the multiple roll-ups that are happening across different spectrums, that becomes much harder to understand where it's going to end up. If people are buying technology companies and charter companies and management companies and asset-based companies, how they put them all together and integrate it.
Is it potentially just a infrastructure coupon clipping, like you buy a toll road and they're viewing FBOs like toll roads?
I don't know, because I don't work for a private equity company. I work for a long-term industrial that we look at long-term value creation. So for us, when we invest in these airports, we expect to be there for a long time.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, Andy, I think there's a question that Mike Francis asked, and his question is does the industry need more quote unquote wholesale fleets like TMC? Seems it is difficult to source when you need owner approval. How would you answer Mike's question?
So, at the surface, the answer is yes. The industry winds up needing more wholesale fleets, but reality is the vast majority of aircraft out there obviously are owned by individual users or corporations, and most of those individual users and corporations, say that 3 times fast, they want to know about their asset. They want to know where it's going, when it's used, and they're going to want to use it themselves. Now, there are plenty of models out there, and several companies wind up doing it that, have specific fleets that are built on no owner approval. And I would probably argue that a lot of us out there that do operate aircraft for charter have certain airplanes that don't need owner approval, but those are the first airplanes that go. People know where those airplanes wind up existing. So if there were more out there, I think everybody that has high demand would love it. So the answer is yes. What I think the embedded question in that is, are there going to be a lot of owners going forward that will buy an airplane with the intent of either greatly offsetting their costs? I know some owners believe that they can actually make money by buying airplanes. There's different feelings on that throughout the industry that we won't wind up getting into. But how many airplanes can enter the marketplace that either belong to an operator that don't have owner approval or are owners are operator owned? We could all use them. There's no question about it. If they are out there, they will wind up getting used. And Mike, to your question, I think all of us would wind up saying, yes, we would like more out there if we could find them.
So, hey, David, Andy just mentioned, some owners think they can make money buying airplanes. We also see some institutions buying airplanes or potentially buying fleets of airplanes thinking they can make money. This goes over and over again. Can you actually make money buying airplanes and just chartering them out? Really?
So, let me go. I'll actually take you back to the session you've just been on, and I'll play back one of your sentences, which was, if you're an owner that paying the bills keeps you awake at night, then you shouldn't be an owner. And so aircraft are either, they're either there for use, or if some owners think they can be there for an investment, then I think it's a hard investment to make money out of. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you're probably right. And at least that's always in. Look at Jet Aviation. You used to own a bunch of G3s and sold them because they couldn't make money on them. And are we back to the future here? with some of the other guys, some of the other competition buying them, and they're going to discover the same thing, in your opinion, or not?
It depends how they class themselves, because I think some of the people that are buying a lot of aircraft just now are into a much kind of wider lifestyle model beyond just having the aviation asset. So it's not there's not that many people out there that are just buying aircraft, putting them into a floating fleet and trying to make money.
Great. Well, I'm going to leave that as the last question because we've run out of time. We've got about a minute left. And I did promise Alasdair and Hannah Burton, who is the backstage coordinator here, that we would finish on time so they can get to bed, since it's 9:45 there. And Alasdair's been at this since some ridiculously early hour in the morning. So in deference and to accommodate both Alasdair and Louise, there you are. Louisa, I've got to say thank you for agreeing to speak on this panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Al. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and it's been a pleasure to work with Al, Hannah, and Louisa as well. So thank you, guys. We'll see you.
Thanks, Ford. See you, Andy.
Thanks, guys. And that was a fantastic end to 14 hours of content.
What on earth were we thinking?
Thanks so much to Andy, David, and Ford. We started in Australia. We went to Asia. We went to Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Americas. Thank you so much to the more than 70 speakers.
To all of you who joined us throughout the day. Some of you actually stayed with us on and off for the full 14 hours. So thank you to you.
NBAA, make sure you are there in Vegas. Pillsbury, Airbus Corporate Jets, Bermuda Aircraft Registry, Collins Aerospace, GE Aviation, Jet HQ, JSSI, Morant, Sunset Aviation Insurance, Viasat, UAS, International Trip Support, Crimson, and Vertis Aviation. Thank you so much.
And we look forward to seeing all of you, hopefully in person, very, very soon.
Miami, Singapore, London, Dubai, and don't forget Revolution.aero in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all your support, all your help. We know how busy you all claim to be, and the fact you found time to watch this. Thank you so much.
And good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you.